Hey guys. Here is part 4 of What If Naruto Went Back in Time from an Alternate Future. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 18, Namikaze Toriku. Naruto let out a long and weary sigh. His eyes were locked onto the ink-black sky, spotted with an uncountable amount of stars, from behind the window of his room. His thoughts wandered around the events of the day. So many things had happened, and they had only increased the weight of the burden on his shoulders. The Kage would soon meet. Orochimaru, Danzo, I forgot about Danzo. Kurama didn't answer, but he still felt the fox's silent nod in agreement. Root, Sai, we must stop him somehow. He is an unknown factor. Aside from his responsibility for Uchiha massacre and the existence of Root, we know nothing about his activity. We don't know how his actions were influencing the future. The old Warhawk always stayed in and acted from the shadows without real confrontation. If we interfere with him now, we won't know the consequences. Naruto narrowed his eyes. What Minato had told us before, about someone trying to debilitate him from the inside, that someone is Danzo. And I've got a feeling that he was behind that mess back at the Kusa borders with Kitsuchi. Oh, it seems you have finally started to use your brain. It's clear now that he was behind that ambush. Naruto only rolled his eyes, and parted his imaginary lips to retort, but the opportunity slipped from his fingers. He sees you as a possible treat. You can hate him for what he has done, but he has always acted for the sake of Konoha. If it wasn't for him, the Sandaime wouldn't have made that step with the Uchiha, and the coup would have been successful. But I doubt he will confront you in public after the failure in Kusa. Maybe he will send an assassin for your head. A snort bubbled up from the back of Naruto's throat. He is still doing things that are unforgivable. And how can you be so casual about Mai and your possible death? Just watch your back extra cautiously. Great. So now I should walk around with an eye on my back even in Konoha. We are safe until the end of the exams. The old Warhawk isn't a fool. Assassinating you now would only raise suspicion on the other nations and show that the leaf is weak. Konoha is not ready for another war. Danzo knows this. He will wait until the exams are over. He won't risk a war over your head. We should worry more about the snake. I don't like how he was eyeing us back then. A cold shiver ran through Naruto's spine, despite the warm cover wrapped around him. Yeah. He waited for more from the fox, but he got no answer. He had already received Kurama's lecture about his sudden urge to confess, and he had listened to it silently, like a guilty child during a scolding from his father. Kurama was right. It was too risky. The less people knew, the safer the future and his plans to change it would be. If anyone leaked out information that he knew such things, half of the elemental countries would be on his heels. But who would believe him anyway? Nobody would believe that he was from the future. How could he even prove it? Tell them things he shouldn't know. Their first thought would be that he was really a spy. Gathering information someone shouldn't have known, that was the purpose of a spy. Show them techniques? Minato had already shown him the Rasengan, so that was out from the box now. And even if he didn't, techniques could be learned and copied. Every technique could be remodeled with time and skill. His sage mode? To be able to use nature's energy is one of the rarest things, but not real evidence. Or show them Kurama's chakra and his seal? Kinkaku and Ginkaku were the finest examples showing that there were ways to obtain a Bija's power other than becoming the Jinchuriki of its original form. What could he show to them to make them believe, instead of just locking him up in an asylum or in a dark cell immediately? But he didn't want to lie to them. He didn't want to deceive them. Maybe it would be better. Just tell them everything and let everything go its way and see what happens. He turned around in the bed to face the empty wall in front of him, waiting for his troubled thoughts to settle down deep inside his mind and finally drift into sleep. 7 figures sat in a clearing, their loud laughs echoing back and forth amongst the trees of the forest surrounding the ancient walls of Konoha. A group of Onbu were lurking behind the shadows of the forest line, guarding their peace invisibly. His parents sat side by side, their hands linked together in their laps. Jiraiya's loud and enthusiastic voice filled the clearing, while the others listened to his tales about the heroes of the Second Great Shinobi War. Everybody was there. His parents, Sarutobi, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Rin, all of them were smiling and laughing. He was happy. Really happy. Minato cleared his throat and straightened himself, grabbing everyone's attention. I have an announcement. Actually, two. He gave a helping hand to Kushina, who also straightened herself, their hands locked one more time in the sweet embrace of pure love. We are getting married. Furthermore, I'm going to be a father. Can you believe it? I'm going to be a father! The cheerfulness expanded into overwhelming joy, while Naruto's heart almost exploded from his chest. Congratulations flew from every side, while he only stared at his parents, still sitting on the ground with a soft smile on his face. Tears of pure happiness stinged the corners of his eyes, and a lump filled the back of his throat. His parents crouched down in front of him, bringing themselves to eye level. Toriku, I want you to be the best big brother to our baby. I want you to guard him, as you promised. I trust you. I trust you with my life, and with the lives of my family. The tears of joy became the tears of guilt, tearing him apart from the inside once again. Kushina embraced him into a hug, her warm voice filled with love as she whispered softly into his ears, and his guilt exploded. His lips parted unconsciously, and the words slipped from his sour and dry lips without a second of consideration. I'm sorry, to all of you. I'm so sorry. I lied to you. I remember. I remember everything. I'm not Toriku. The cheerful voices suddenly stopped. Everything froze, and even the nature around them became soundless. Naruto glanced up at his father, whose expression first mirrored confusion, then a second later morphed into the perfect mask of betrayal, anger, and sheer fury. Kushina quickly backed away from him. Her eyes flamed with hurt, stabbing into his very soul. Killing intent flashed across the clearing, and in the next moment, he found himself on the ground, pinned down painfully by the Anbu guards. His father's stern voice reached his ears in the next second. Then who are you? My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I don't know how, but I traveled back in time. I'm from the future. I'm the child who will be born to you soon. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Everybody looked back at him with eyes colder than the glaciers of the Arctic. The love and care had long disappeared, and were replaced by the same look he had received during his childhood. The same pointed and cold stares. The same hatred, disgust, and loathing shined in their eyes. His heart cracked, together with his soul. You are insane! Take him to prison! I don't want to see him again! Naruto started to struggle, trying to get rid of the Anbu on his back, but his muscles became numb when he felt 2 fingers on the side of his neck, immediately closing his natural chakra flow. Wait! You have to believe me! You are in danger! All of you! Madara is going to kill you! Wait, damn it! His only answer was narrowed eyes from his father, while Jiraiya's voice echoed in the clearing. You are just insane! Who would believe you? You have to believe me! I'm not insane! At least listen to me, damn it! Golden flames encompassed his body as he reached for Kurama's power in his desperate struggle, making the Anbu on his back leap away as soon as the golden chakra touched their skin. He moved to get to his father, but Minato had already turned his back and started to walk away with Kushina. The world around them suddenly slipped to the side. A figure in an orange mask appeared between his parents, their figures disappearing inside a whirling vortex. His heart pumped rapidly, and his head desperately snapped toward the remaining figures, only to see them disappear one by one, each of them to their destined death. He saw the Shinigami behind Sarutobi, he saw as Rin dropped to the ground with an enormous stab wound in her chest, he saw as Jiraiya slowly slumped over, his body pinned by black rods. Only Kakashi remained untouched in the middle of the clearing, slowly walking toward him, his right arm already shrouded by electric blue lightning chakra. Naruto held up his hands in the universal sign of surrender. Sensei! Wait! We have to save them! We can save them! The small Kakashi didn't listen to him. He just shot forward, and in the next moment lightning chakra cracked Naruto's ribs, tearing into his chest. He didn't feel pain, only betrayal and overwhelming panic, but it flared only for a second before his nerves calmed down. It's just a dream. It's just a stupid dream. Naruto let his head fall onto his torso as soon as a relieved sigh left his lips. You are still weak. His head snapped up when he heard Madara's voice. Where a moment ago Kakashi had stood, now there were 2 crimson-red orbs. He saw nothing else, only the sinister eyes, but he knew who they belonged to perfectly. He stared squarely at the eyes, which were shining with a sinister crimson red. The 3 Tomo were slowly spinning and transforming into the form of the Manjikyu Sharingan, only to change a second later into its final stage, the purple Rinnegan. With the last bit of his power, he grabbed the hand still buried into his chest, the odd mixture of fury and determination rising inside him to an unbearable level. I'm going to stop you! I don't care about your Manjikyu Sharingan, or the Rinnegan or the Jubi, I'm going to stop you, Uchiha! This time I won't let them die! Madara only laughed unstoppingly, filling everything with his insanity as it echoed back and forth around him, while Naruto's body started to shake uncontrollably. I promise I'm going to stop you! The shaking increased, the world tilted again, and the ground slipped away from under his feet. Naruto jerked up from his bed, still on the verge of dream and reality, gasping for air. The next thing he noted was that he was staring into identical blue eyes, shining with concern. Dad? Minato's eyes widened for a second. It took Naruto a long moment to puzzle out what had happened, while his heavy breathing filled the air around them. His foggy brain slowly cleared, and his experienced eyes surveyed his environment. Orange walls, soft bed. He was in his room. The blonde distantly realized that he was gripping Minato's arms, his nails digging deep into his father's flesh, drawing blood and coloring Minato's light blue shirt. The adrenaline suddenly rushed out from his system, and he slowly released his painful grip on his father's arm, careful to not make any more damage. Without the boost, his head swayed and otherworldly fatigue rushed through his body, despite the fact that he had just woken up from his disturbing sleep. Naruto slumped forward with a groan, his shirt, soaked by his salty sweat, stuck to his body, his blanket completely crumpled and twisted at his feet. He wasn't just exhausted. He felt dead. When he finally managed to catch his breath and his rapidly beating heart slowed down, he shook his head to ease away the last bits of his nightmare and clear his thoughts. But it had the opposite effect. Instead of disappearing, the image of his loved ones' bloody bodies popped up ceaselessly in his mind once again, supplemented with depictions of the death of his comrades, his friends, along with pictures of countless motionless, nameless bodies on the blood-soaked battlefields. The almost unbearable weight of his responsibility settled down on his shoulders, pushing and slumping his body further into his ruined bed. As soon as he felt the sudden lump in his throat and the sting in the back of his eyes, he instantly burrowed his face deep into his palms, shrouding his swaying emotions on his face from his father's concerned eyes. He didn't want him to see him like this. A muffled, almost silent sob escaped from behind his hands, and he immediately felt gentle arms wrapping around his frame. His muscles tensed for a second from the unfamiliar contact, before he relaxed in the hug, his father's gentle whisper stroking his soul. "It's all right. Let it out." Naruto violently shook his head in denial, his face still hidden in his hands. He tried to brace himself with the last strings of his pride, but it was a lost cause from the moment he felt Minato's arms around him. Another painful and muffled sob escaped from behind his lips, when a new pair of arms joined to his father's. Smaller and gentler hands stroked his back, and Naruto unconsciously leaned into the warm touch of his mother. His walls cracked, and the dam that had been restraining his emotions ever since the Fourth Shinobi War started to break into tiny pieces. Unstoppable and shameless tears started to flow freely from his eyes, gathering in the lines of his skin to flow down onto his lap. He cried soundlessly like a 10-year-old child for long minutes, aside from one or two muffled sobs which managed to escape behind his palms, until he felt a gentle touch on two special points at the back of his neck. He didn't struggle, only nodded softly, accepting the offered help from his father to flee from his misery. A small spike of warm chakra ran through his system from the two pressure points, and his body relaxed and almost immediately drifted into a dreamless sleep. Minato gently placed him down on the bed, while Kushina grabbed a clean blanket. When they were finished, they stood in the door without a word, watching the now peacefully breathing teenager. His eyelids were still shining wet, but his relaxed expression calmed their aching hearts. A cheeky smile appeared on Kushina's face, followed by a small giggle, smoothing the heavy mood instantly. "He called you Dad. Minato responded with a small, soft smile, while his eyes wandered back once more to his brother's peaceful form. He studied his face for a long, silent minute, his eyes lingering on the small traces of childhood still hovering on his features, but he already could see the sharper jawline and hints of a soon-to-be fine man. "Sometimes I forget that although he is a fine shinobi, he has also just left his childhood behind. We don't even know how old he is, Kushina. He looks around 18, but he could be much younger. I don't know really. Sometimes he acts like a 10-year-old child, and then in the next minute he spreads wisdom like an ancient old sage. But it was strange. I've never heard or seen him like this before. Let him sleep. You can discuss it tomorrow. It's damn late and I'm sleepy." They settled down inside their warm bed, but for the rest of the night, the Yondaime Hokage couldn't find any more rest. His brother's pained and desperate yells echoed inside his head, as did his mumbling from before Kushina stepped into the room. His mumbles about the Manjikyu Sharingan. A memory floated inside his mind from their previous talk in the office. Torika had wanted to talk to him. He had desperately wanted to tell him something. Confess something. Damn all his luck and all his secretaries for their bad timing. He could start to feel suspicious again. He could run to Inoichi demanding an immediate checkup. But he dismissed the idea. Even if he remembered something, the happiness and love in Torika's eyes when he looked at them were still genuine. And the faint shadows of sorrow and guilt behind those azure pools were also genuine. They didn't appear long enough to be recognizable to anyone, but if Minato was really looking for it, he could see it. They were real. Those kind of emotions could not be manipulated. The yellow flash let out a long sigh and folded his arms tighter around Kushina. First he would try to solve this jigsaw by himself, before he shook the fragile base of their trust again. It had been a week since Naruto had woken up in the middle of the night from his nightmare. For that long week Minato tried to speak with him, even corner him, but he refused to talk about it. He had been desperately trying to avoid the subject for as long as it possible. Naruto was frustrated, and it only became worse and worse as the days passed. Nothing went as he planned, despite his determination growing after that dream, and him finally resigning to the fact that he was never going to reveal his identity. Everything had gone wrong. A clone had been searching continuously for Obito and Madara, hidden deep in the woods behind barriers, far from the walls of Konoha. But success eluded him. He found every damned shinobi of the elemental countries except for the two he was desperately looking for. And he also had to accept that a certain damned snake had also managed to sneak out of his reach. If he could at least find Orochimaru and one of his labs, but no. That serpent was not a fool. His presence disappeared at random times from random places. There was no pattern, not a sign, not anything that could lead Naruto to one of his hidden labs. But then again, it wasn't all that surprising, seeing as the snake had probably been acting in secret for a long period of time even back then, might even have been for decades without anyone noticing his hidden activities. But to hide from his senjutsu like this he had to admit the snake bastard was good. He wasn't one of the Sannin for nothing. He let out an angry snort, and shook his head in frustration. His legs moved automatically toward his destination on the thin path, to the Hokage mansion at the border of the village. He nodded in greeting toward the Anbu guard who was lurking behind the shadows of a bush, silently watching over their peace and safety. After a short chain of hand signs, he channeled some chakra into the small seal and the big mahogany door opened with an almost silent click. Muffled voices could be heard from the living room. After a second of consideration he decided to grab something to eat from the kitchen before heading up to his room. Minato most likely had a visitor and based on the chakra signature, it was Uchiha Fugaku. Naruto didn't want to meet with that man. He always looked at him like he was some kind of criminal. He grimaced at the thought. He never liked the man and after Tobi told them the truth behind the massacre, the dislike only increased. Naruto opened the fridge, but he froze when the muffled voices became louder and more vehement. They were arguing and the privacy seal he sensed was becoming weaker and weaker, based on the louder and louder argument until it finally completely disappeared when it ran out of chakra. Their voices echoed back and forth inside the house crystal clear. Toriku is the living example that it is already out of your hands. The clan head simply folded his arms in front of his chest, and raised his head higher in denial. This proves nothing. That is just your theory about his appearance, and you have got no real evidence. You still don't have any proof that he is here because of an Uchiha. You can't be that impassive about this. You know just as well as I do that it is the most relevant theory. There is someone else out there with a Sharingan. An Uchiha or someone else with the Dijitsu who is powerful enough to disarm him. And I think his outburst last week is proof enough. Tell me. You claim that no one of your clan attacked him, and no one possesses the Manjikyu Sharingan. Then how did he know about it? Hell, even I didn't know the Manjikyu stage existed, and neither did you before you dug up the clan's archives for me. So don't try telling me that his appearance isn't connected with it. Naruto froze. What the hell? How the hell did they know about that? Was he talking in his sleep? Don't be too concerned. They are just grasping around in the dark. At least they will be more on alert when the time comes. Naruto only nodded as a silent response. His senses were still glued on the conversation and in the next room, afraid of missing even a word. I'm not here because of that. We've already discussed that topic 100 times since he appeared, and no one from my clan attacked that damn kid and no one is out of there with a Sharingan besides Kakashi. Don't change the topic. I came here to talk about your student. The elders have made a last request for you. The Uchiha Dijitsu isn't something that can simply be offered. The elders are still adamant about their previous stand. A furious snort echoed in the large living room, and it was soon followed by the killer intent of Minato. I still don't care what your elders are demanding. I am the Hokage, and I said no once and I will say no this time too. Tell the old geezers again that Kakashi's Sharingan will stay where it is. It was Obito's last wish, and not even the clan can go against his last will. Naruto froze again, his jaw almost to the ground. He had also seen the glares Kakashi sometimes received from the members of the Uchiha clan, but he never thought the situation was this stressed. That they wanted to get back Obito's eye. Minato. If you go against them, you will lose the elder support with time. The Yondaime snorted one more time and turned his back to the clan leader. And what about your support? Fugaku let out a weary sigh. I thought you knew that during your short time as the Hokage, you have managed to earn my support, but as a clan head, I also have to take into consideration the decisions of the elders. As a clan head, I have to be focused on the clan's interest and welfare beyond my personal opinions. But I must warn you. The clan is becoming more and more distant from Konoha. The new information stunned Naruto. It had already begun. The clan was already starting to loosen its bonds with the village. But more importantly, Fugaku had apparently been originally opposed to the coup, because of Minato. Then why? Why was it that in the end, he stepped up with the elders? It was my attack and his death. After your birth, the village did not trust in the Uchiha anymore. That was the last nail in their coffin. It seems your father's death links more events than we first thought. Naruto only nodded in agreement. That means if he could prevent that, maybe he could also interfere with the massacre directly. I respect you more than the third. He was a good leader, but he started to become too old, too kind-hearted and blind to some serious problems. During this short period of time, you have already proved to me that I was wrong to think that you would follow his footsteps. Without your silent support of the clan, the elders' grudge would have only grown larger and larger. The loyalty of the clan hangs by a hair and only your silent acts are restraining them from doing something. I can see what are you doing? What are you trying to do? But it's not enough. The clan leader shook his head and continued. Currently I am the only one who stands against them and you and I have to admit my tolerance will also reach its end if things continue as they are. We are one of the founding clans, but it seems like the village sometimes forgets this. The Uchiha clan is becoming alienated, and not just by the village's shinobi, but also by the other citizens. They fear us like we were some kind of criminals and not the ones who are guarding their peace. Do you think that I like this situation? Where there is a village inside the village? Do you think I'm so blind that I can't see the problems between your clan and the others? That I don't realize the people are starting to fear you instead of honoring your name? That I haven't noticed some of you growing more and more arrogant because of it? Minato. The named man closed his mouth immediately when their eyes met for a second. And what he found in the dark eyes made the hair on the back of his neck stand up instantly. It was fear. Some of the elders are even whispering about a coup. They'll soon take the reins if nothing happens. Minato didn't respond for a long minute, allowing his thoughts to settle down. And when they finally did so, he let out a long sigh. How much time do you think we have before that happens? Fugaku didn't answer for another long moment, gathering and more likely waiting his own words before they finally echoed inside the small room. Years. A decade at most if nothing changes. Most of the clan aren't supporting the act. Yet. But with time. Who else knows about it? Nobody else. Just you. Not even the Sandaime. Good. It must stay like that. Naruto finally decided it was enough. He heard plenty, and if they found out he was eavesdropping, he would get into big trouble. Not to mention if someone else overheard this conversation, the clan would be in bigger trouble. He slowly moved to the entrance of the room and hesitantly cleared his throat to gain the other two men's attention. It was successful. They immediately flung their heads toward him. Minato blinked, and the stern face of the clan leader immediately melted away, first to surprise, then to shock. The Hokage glanced down to the privacy seal on the coffee table and grimaced, immediately replacing the worn-out seal, before turning toward his relative with the full authority of the Yondaime Hokage. What you've heard here cannot slip from your mouth. Ever. You understand? Naruto nodded and turned toward the clan leader. My apologies, Uchiha-sama, but if you don't agree with the elders, why don't you just go against them? Fugaku raised an eyebrow, observing him with a carefully emotionless face. However, Naruto saw that he was restraining himself from snapping at him immediately or casting him out from the room. You know nothing about the situation. Naruto shrugged. Maybe I don't know every aspect, but even I can see that it's not too difficult a situation. You have to dismiss the segregation and stand your place against your elders. Fugaku's eyebrow rose more, if that was even possible. His muscles visibly tensed, but Minato only shook his head. It isn't that easy. If Fugaku openly goes against the elders, they could strip him of his position as clan head, and they would place someone else whom they could move as a puppet. Naruto narrowed his eyes and grimaced. Then you just have to flip the situation upside down. He has to obtain the elders' full respect to influence them. That would give you time to change the situation. The biggest problem is the separation, I guess. Minato quirked an eyebrow. What's on your mind, Torika? What could he know about politics? He is just a teenager. The clan leader snorted, but the Hokage slowly shook his head. I would disagree with that. He is good at affecting people to go into a better direction. and he is often able to see aspects that have been overlooked. Naruto unconsciously straightened himself after his father's praise. Well, if maybe. Naruto trailed off. People respect power, and this is definitely more true for the most powerful clan in Konoha. His thoughts drifted back to stuck-up and almighty Uchiha Sasuke. He never showed any respect to him, at least not until he proved that he was at least equal to him. I mean, you two trust each other. Well, if I'm judging correctly. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't share this kind of information. The named men shared a quick glance and nodded. Well then, Minato, why don't you give him a position of authority and power? It would please the elders and he could act freely as a clan head. If he shows that he has your respect, they will settle down, and you can work more calmly on the root of the problem. I know that walls can't just be bulldozed down, but if you let the people know more about the clan, it could be a good start. For example, becoming a police officer is a cool thing. Minato frowned and turned around, lost in his thoughts for a long silent minute, unaware of the other two men in the room eyeing him warily. They could also become greedy by this. There is a chance that they will ask for more power, and still try to go against Fugaku's will. This time, it was Fugaku who shook his head. The decoy could actually work. The boy is right. The elders respect power above everything else. This could settle down their frustration and give us more time to work on the segregation. We as a clan should become more open to the village. He glanced at Naruto with narrowed eyes. The question is how you know my clan so well. Naruto only casually shrugged and poked his temple. This was the first time he actually felt grateful for Kurama's small interference back then. He could cover up a lot of things with his amnesia as an excuse. Minato let out a small chuckle and finally turned around to face the others, his face serious once more. I was already arranging a big change with the body of personal advisors, but I wanted to wait until the council became more familiar with me before pushing them over the edge. I plan to make this step next year, but I think now is as good a time as any, if not better. Minato folded his arms across his chest, a frown appearing on his face as he became lost in his thoughts. You haven't mentioned anything like that. No, because it wasn't relevant, Fugaku. They are at ease currently, but it would give us a perfect opportunity. Minato shrugged casually. What's your plan? The Hokage's personal advisors aren't satisfying my needs, Minato explained. I don't trust them. They were chosen by the Sandaime decades ago, and since then they've gathered too much power and have become too arrogant. I'm sure they won't stay silent for long. I can't let them gather so much power as to allow them to act freely behind the Hokage's back. Behind my back. I'm aware that one advisor especially is trying to influence the other two to his advantage in smaller issues, but I can't just simply cancel the whole body. The body of personal advisors is essential in case a fast decision is necessary. I also need the help and advice. That one individual is especially problematic. But first I need to steady the other sections of the personal advisors. Only after that is done can I try to get rid of him. And slowly. I'm afraid that if I just cut him out of the system, he will do something drastic. A deep frown appeared on Minato's face, his eyes darkening into royal blue. Danzo, he could be a big problem in the future. Minato started to pace back and forth in the room, lost in his own world for long silent minutes, his movements followed by the curious eyes of his two companions. I believe that he acts on behalf of the village. I truly believe that his intentions are not against the village's welfare, but I do believe that he is walking in the wrong direction. He is heading into the very darkness Sarutobi left him to handle. I'm afraid that with time he will act more drastically, forsaking morals, if he hasn't already taken that step. While I do believe he loves Konoha as much as I do, there is a line over which I would never cross. But he doesn't have such limits. He will do anything for Konoha. And that anything is something I'm afraid to even contemplate. He would kill and manipulate people if he thinks it necessary for Konoha's future. I have to interfere before something goes terribly wrong. I'm aware of his. He glanced toward his brother. Plaything. Naruto frowned. So his father did know about Root. What do you want to do with the personal advisors? Minato stopped his pacing and looked up at Fugaku to answer his question. As I already told you, they have too much power and I don't trust them. I want trustworthy and strong people around me when there is no time to summon the whole council. Plus, currently they don't have the knowledge to fully support the Hokage. Instead, they are three old hags who aren't up to date with things. Okay, I have to admit Danzo is up to date, but the other two... Minato slowly shook his head again. I want to reselect the 3 personal council members as a first step. Who do you have in mind? Minato turned to face Fugaku. The Jounin commander, Nara Shikaku, as the brain and as the representative of the shinobi. He knows our shinobi up and down, and because of missions he also knows what's going on outside of the walls. Naruto suppressed an amused snort. During the war and after Shikaku's death, it was Shikamaru who had acted as the tactician and the brain, keeping Naruto from just rushing out thoughtlessly. If Naruto hadn't declined the position back then, as Hokage, he'd have definitely wanted Shikaku's son beside him. One open position for someone who will be elected by the current General Council. I will give free rein to the council in that matter. And last but not least, the third member, who will also be picked by me personally, will be someone who knows what's going on inside the village, among both civilians and shinobi, and also is up to date with the village's security. Someone who will interact with and already looks out for the civilians. Someone who will cooperate with them in some cases from now on. Maybe with that, his people could forge stronger bonds with them. A small smile appeared on Minato's face as he observed the clan leader with an amused glint in his eyes, watching as realization slowly appeared on Fugaku's face, forcing the calm mask he always wore to crack as his features moved into the perfect example of disbelief. I don't know what to say. Minato sent a wide grin to his hesitant companion. Just accept. You are more than suitable to be one of my personal advisors. I earned your respect with time. You didn't just give it to me instantly like the others. Furthermore, you are not afraid to tell me if I'm doing something idiotic. I'm going to speak with that lazy Nara and I will put the changes to vote at the next council meeting. Assuming they pass, we'd not only be helping the Uchiha segregation issue, but we'd also shake up Danzo quite a bit. Naruto frowned, confusion running across his face. This Danzo guy, he has the power to influence the council, right? If you want to remove him, you have to make sure that they won't elect him to the open position again and again. A cheeky smile appeared on Minato's face. There will be a new rule. Those who have already acted as personal advisors will be forbidden from that position for 10 years after the first election. With this rule, all of the council members will get a chance to become the Hokage's personal advisor. Plus, it would rule out the possibility of someone gaining too much power for a long period of time. I think the council will understand my point of view. Naruto only hummed in response and scratched his cheek. Still, it's very likely that Danzo will be the third member. Minato shrugged. But I won't be too bothered if Danzo gets his seat back now. His presence would be troublesome, but if the other two advisors are hard to influence, it won't be an issue. That is the current main problem. Hamura and Kohara are easy to influence, and the three of them together could easily outrule my decisions. I don't have any doubts that with Fugaku and Shikaku at my side he will lose a major part of his power. Maybe it is a temporary solution until the next round, but it will always depend on the other parties of the council. I bet that the next personal advisor body will have Hyuga Hayashi and the Inuzuka head in the line. They are both hard to influence and loyal to the Hokage and have the support of the other clans. If my intuition is correct, and most of the time it is, it won't matter who the third party is as long as the other two are loyal and trustworthy. With Danzo not in a position to drastically influence the decision-making process, I could sleep well at night for a long time. Our next step is to make the Konoha military police force open to any shinobi and not exclusive to Uchiha. We will let them join your side. Let them see and experience your daily life and intermingle with the clan members. It'll help. And with time, the walls that are now separating your clan from the rest of the village can fall. Fugaku made a wondering face, then in the end nodded, slightly lower with gratitude than was actually necessary. Minato sent a small smile toward the clan head before he turned to his brother, once again slipping into the authority of a Hokage. You already know, but I will repeat once more. Everything you heard now, or before, is a village secret. Under no condition are you to repeat any of this. If this information were to reach Danzo's ears, I don't even want to think about what he would do to prevent a future coup. I understand, Hokage-sama. I really appreciate your trust. Naruto made a small bow with his head, adding weight his words. Minato watched his brother figure's every small movement, every twitch of his muscles, every change in his eyes, but when he found no lie there, he nodded. Good. Fugaku, we will talk tomorrow. The named man made a small bow and left the house, leaving the two blondes alone. Minato's cerulean eyes observes his relative with an unreadable expression, until his features settled into a small smile. You know, with a little polishing around the edges, you would become great Hokage material. Naruto's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened as he glanced up to his father. Seriously? Yeah. Seriously. Your diplomatic style may be a little rough, but that's something that can be learned with time. A little more manners and thoughtfulness and you'd be good to go. With your personality, you would be a good leader. Determined, sometimes easygoing or goofy, even silly, but with that you'll easily line everyone behind you with time. You've been here since when? 5 months? And you've already managed to wind a quarter of the village around your finger. Minato grinned and continued. Sometimes you act like an idiot, but you can also be deathly serious and as wise as a sage when you have to be. You are unpredictable, which is also good in politics, and you have a tendency to throw a stone into still water. Your hero complex is just a bonus to the package, even if it makes you reckless sometimes. You're not afraid to sacrifice your life for your loved ones, and this is something a real leader would do for the village. A beaming smile appeared on Minato's face, his hands still resting on Naruto's shoulders, who silently stared up at with disbelief. The edge of his ears flamed crimson red. If you become much stronger, I should really start to be afraid for my hat. Minato's face softened to a tender smile as he continued. I don't know where you come from, but the will of fire burns inside you, even brighter than it does in some of the native-born shinobi of Konoha. Naruto's whole body seemed to beam with pride. But he also felt a little bit of regret. He had declined the position to be the Rokudame. Maybe it was the wrong decision after all. Minato tightened his grip a little on his shoulder to get his attention, and he immediately glanced up to his father's now concerned eyes. Look, I know you don't want to talk about what happened last week, but if you ever change your mind, I will be here. But I would really appreciate your trust. Naruto felt his body stiffen, and he almost immediately averted his gaze. He licked his lips to ease away the dryness, and sent a wide grin in response. Thanks, but it was just a silly dream about me falling from the sky. Minato frowned. Even when the grin looked honest, even when his voice was cheerful, he could see the lie in his eyes. He could see that even when he concentrated with every nerve to look happy, his eyes didn't sparkle with the same cheerfulness. They were darkened, they were foggy. Clouded by guilt once again. Then it was gone. Minato let out a weary sigh and shook his head. Please, don't lie to me. Naruto flinched, and his orbs drifted to the side in shame, even though his father's voice was barely enough to call it a whisper. That was it. He really couldn't lie directly to his father's face. His voice was soft as he mumbled his sincere answer. You were dead, all of you were killed. Kushina, Jiraiya, everyone I care for. Minato frowned, watching his brother's eyes with his every nerve. Now they seemed sincere. The fourth let out another sigh. Is it connected with a Mangekyo's Sharingan? Naruto hesitantly nodded. He didn't dare to look back to his father, afraid to see suspicion in his eyes. I see. But don't be concerned. We are all more than capable of kicking in Uchiha's ass if necessary. A wide and confident smile appeared on Minato's face. Naruto finally gathered enough courage and glanced up to his smiling father, but he could force only a shadow of a real smile on his own face. Yeah. But not if he has Kurama as backup. He added silently. Are you really sure about this? Naruto made a determined nod in his mindscape. I'm sure. It could damage him. He is a damn genius. He can handle it. Hey, are you going to show me what you mumbled about before, or did you drag me here to watch you daydream? Naruto glanced up to meet his father's annoyed, but still curious blue eyes. Scrunching his nose with a grimace, he retorted. Geez, for being a Hokage you sure are impatient. The blonde time traveler shook his head disapprovingly, and gestured toward the edge of the training ground. The named impatient Hokage rolled his eyes, but obediently walked to the side and folded his arms in front his chest, even tapping the ground continuously with his foot like a small child, waiting for his brother to finally demonstrate why he had been dragged through the whole village without any explanation. Minato watched with impatient eyes as two clones popped into existence next to his brother figure. One of them started talking while they moved into position, forming a triangle. The trick is in the teamwork. But as soon as it strikes you have to run for your life, or you will also get caught in the effects. If that happens, it could be deadly for you. The real Naruto made a last glance toward his father and sent a wide smirk. Now just watch. The young Hokage snorted and opened his mouth to retort in annoyance. But his mouth was left hanging open, his eyes widened, and his arms slackened as powerful chakra started to swirl with insane speed between the palms of his relative and the clones, and he realized what was about to happen. A shining azure orb, made from pure energy, appeared between the hands, then it slowly shifted. The air filled with the squealing sound of razor-sharp wind chakra. 4 snow-white chakra blades appeared on the sides of the Rasengan, made by pure wind chakra. Minato's ears slowly became numb from the harsh sound as millions of invisible blades continuously cut into the empty air, and the blonde teen slowly raised the finished technique above his head. Futon Raisin Shuriken, Naruto said in a low tone, but his lips turned into the widest grin he could manage without tearing his face apart, seeing the expression on his father's features. He let the ball spin slower and slower until it faded into nothingness. Step by step, the squealing sound faded away, leaving behind an unnatural silence. The young Hokage's eyes were still frozen on the now empty place where not a second ago he could see the technique he'd been desperately trying to finish for years. And there stood his brother, maybe a decade younger than him, and he pulled it out like it was nothing. His ears were still ringing, his eyes were still wide, his sight still frozen to the place where the technique disappeared. Even his mind became numb by the sheer power of the technique. Naruto slowly stepped in front of him with a satisfied smile on his face. So, you want to learn it? Azure eyes snapped back to reality as he blinked away his awe. Then in the next second Minato smirked. You can bet on it, Otsuto. Excited, surprised, and even angry murmurs spread across the lines of the village council after Minato's announcement. The aforementioned man watched the members with a straight face, his chin resting on his folded fingers, but when the members didn't seem to calm down after 2 minutes of continuous argument, a vein started to throb on his temple, mimicking the rhythm of his heartbeat. Silence! He slammed his fist onto the hard surface of the wooden table, making the murmurs die down immediately. Don't act like immature children. You heard my proposal. Now I'm waiting for any intelligent questions concerning my decision. You can't do this. Danzo was the first one to hiss out through his gritted teeth in restrained anger, and sent a very out-of-character pointed glare toward Minato. I would like to correct you, Danzo-san. I can do it, if the General Council and the daimyo agree with my proposal. I already received the daimyo's approval months ago, and I don't think our members will oppose it after hearing the details. The current personal advisory body is not competent enough to support decision-making in a lot of aspects. How dare you! Hamura and Kohara stood up as one immediately, with speed to give lie to their age. Minato only raised a silencing hand, aware of the raised eyebrow of the third next to him. My apologies for my rudeness, but the Hokage's personal advisors must be up to date with everything that goes on inside and outside of the village. While I do not question your knowledge and experience in other aspects, you are definitely not competent in this very important part. Tell me, Kohara-san, what's the current situation between Kusa and Takigakure? We know nothing about their current relation, and you know this very well. Shikaka-san, what's your opinion in this case? The Nara closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts before he opened them to answer. Minato, you sly fox. That is true, that we haven't received any direct information, but during the assignments in that area, our troops spotted several patrolling groups from both of the villages. The activity had been increasing until 2 weeks ago, when we received an assassination request. The target was one of the Takigakure noblemen. The client was officially anonymous, but it is clear that it was Kusa. After the assassination, the patrolling died down and our troops spotted several small groups, with 1 or 2 envoys, going back and forth between the 2 small villages. After that nobleman's death, they've obviously started peace talks with each other. You could have received all of this information if you read the mission reports, Kohara-san. Minato nodded, and a satisfied smile appearing on his face when he saw the twitching eyes of the old woman. This proves nothing. Minato closed his eyes, then glanced toward Hamura. Hamura-san. Something happened 2 days ago in the 6th district of the village, at the market. Could you enlighten us about that case? The named man narrowed his eyes, and snorted dismissively. Minato had already won. Uchiha-san. If you would be so kind. Fugaka nodded. A new, small group of traveling merchants arrived to the village 3 days ago. They are working with unbelievably cheap prices. Our vendors didn't tolerate that too well. Thank you, Uchiha-san. Minato nodded. Is there any more questions considering the necessity of a new personal advisor body? His only answer was silence, and he nodded once more in acknowledgement. If there are no more questions, I will open the vote. Those who agree with my proposals regarding the personal advisory body, please raise your hands. Several hands rose almost immediately, and the supporters were obviously dominant. He didn't even have to count the raised hands. And lastly, there is another issue you have to be aware of. From next week, Konoha military police forces will accept recruits outside the Uchiha clan. Minato looked over the council members one by one, waiting for any reaction or resistance, but none came. A wide grin spread across his face. Perfect. For the next council meeting, discuss who you are going to nominate as the third advisor. You are dismissed. Minato watched as the members left the room one by one, most of them with an amused expression on their face. Only the third Hokage stayed, still sitting by his side, stoically puffing his never-missing pipe and filling the meeting room with the scent of the mixture of herbs and tobacco. When the last of the council left the room, Minato allowed himself to let out a relieved sigh and slumped down to the desk. He enjoyed the cold surface of the wood against his throbbing temple with closed eyes. The Sandaime cleared his throat to gain his attention. Just let me enjoy my victory for a little longer in silence. Please. Minato grunted. You made a dangerous step, Minato. You didn't just poke, you kicked the sleeping tiger in the face. The named blonde let out a long and weary sigh and straightened himself to rub his eyes. A dangerous, but necessary step. And you know that. He's got too much influence over Hamura and Koharu. Maybe you could ignore that for years, but I can't allude to senility like you. Sarutobi let out an amused snort. I'm not that old. Yet you still turned a blind eye, just so you didn't have to see the problems. The third rubbed the bridge of his nose and let out a weary sigh. In the next second, the shadows around his wrinkles deepened, his back seemed to slump slightly under a sudden weight like he had suddenly become older by a decade during this 1 second. Maybe you think I let him act on his own and I turned my head, but letting him do so for this long was part of a long-term plan. While Danzo stays in the background, he won't do anything drastic. But now, I really don't know what his next move will be. Minato snorted and folded his arms across his chest. You were gambling like Tsunade. I know what Danzo is doing behind the scenes, and I know you let him deal with the darkest missions. I understand why you left him and Root Anbu alone. But we are different. Maybe you are right. Maybe I became too old to deal with hindrances, and maybe I believed that if I pretended a problem didn't exist it would simply disappear with time. The Shodaime and the Nidaime also warned me about this. Minato let out a small smile. Perhaps. But all of us have our weaknesses. I've got friends to turn to if I need help. So do you. You just sometimes forgot that and bore those burdens alone. Maybe. But I think I made at least one good decision, to give my hat to you. The third answered with a small smile on his face. They stayed in silence, enjoying each other's company in the empty meeting room. The third blew out some bluish smoke, watching as it danced through the air, swirling abstractly only to completely dissolve in the air a second later. Sarutobi eyed the young leader carefully, his old experienced eyes observing him with a little concern. Do you think it was a good idea to teach him the Rasengan? Not to mention to dismiss the surveillance? Minato rolled his head side to ease away the stiffness of his muscles and also hide his annoyance. He didn't answer, only shrugged. Silence fell over them for another long minute until the Yondaime opened his mouth to finally respond. Since he appeared, he's done nothing wrong. He is a good boy, Sarutobi. All of his actions have caused only benefit to this village and not harm. The Kazekage is grateful to us. He saved the life of his wife and the sanity of his son. The alliance between Konoha and Suna is stronger than it would have been without him. Every country agreed to participate in the Chunin exams for the first time since the Second Shinobi War. All the 5 Kage met for the first time in history. Maybe we can really make an alliance. Or at least make the first step toward it. And I also got the final push to make the necessary steps to change the council and help out the Uchiha. Kakashi slowly starting to get out from his shell thanks to Toriku. Hell, I heard him snicker last week. And he gave a powerful jutsu to me. Sarutobi didn't answer. His old eyes were still locked on his successor, who just continued without a pause. I'm not dense. I'm aware that he changed, but I truly believe that he means no harm to the village and my opinion won't change until he does something to contradict it. I know perfectly well when he is lying. A weary sigh left Minato's soft lips, then a caring smile spread across his face. He is a member of my family and he truly cares for this village. In fact, he cares for the whole shinobi world. I also want peace between all of the nations, but compared to his determination and efforts, mine look like a child's plaything. A hand ran through his golden locks, easing away his increasing frustration. You can sleep well, Hiruzen. If we spot anything that points towards him being a threat, we will step in. But not before. I still know my responsibilities. You don't have to remind me about them. If I have to, I will kill my heart for this village. I would die for this village. But for now, I trust him. Hiruzen's eyes stabbed through Minato, looking into the very soul of the man in front of him. And when he found what he was looking for, the third nodded in his satisfaction. The distant sounds of dripping water filled the black passages, while the faint light of the lamps painted abstract forms with the shadows on the floor. Otherworldly shadow creatures danced on the empty walls, and the only thing that broke their struggle was a lonely figure in black robes who silently slipped toward a giant wooden door like a snake. The hinges didn't squeak, or make any sound in general, and the door opened as smoothly as the visitor's soundless and graceful movements in the passage. He stepped closer to the wooden desk in the middle of the room, and the lean figure glanced at a very ravaged Danzo seated behind it. The Warhawk took his time before he addressed the visitor with a tint of irritation in his voice. You have some new information to report, Orochimaru? No. Nothing new which worth mentioning. I see. So he has no bloodline limit, no other special abilities that could give us a headache? A shadow of a sinister smile flashed across on the pale face, but not for a long enough time to be recognizable. He has strong jutsus, an advanced understanding in Fuin jutsu and enhanced sensing abilities, but those are already listed in the previous reports. Nothing new that a bigger group of elites can handle. Then why did you volunteer for this task? Any of my elite shinobi could do this reconnaissance. The Sannin didn't answer for a long silent minute, weighing his words carefully before he opened his mouth, revealing predatory sharp and pointed teeth behind his lips. Let's just say I got a small grudge against Minato-kun and some personal interests in Toriko-kun. Jiraiya watched from behind as his former sensei fixed his old and experienced eyes out through the window. The orbs darted across the people below his gaze, living their own, innocent lives, unaware of the hidden problems hovering above their heads continuously. The Sannin sipped from his tea, waiting for Sarutobi to finally face him and settle down in front of him. He didn't have to wait too long. I want you to be sincere. What's the situation with Toriko-kun? Did you find anything new that points toward him being a threat to this village? Although Sarutobi wasn't the leader of the village anymore, he still kept an eye on some cases. And Minato's newfound relative was one of those special cases. The Toad Sage took another sip, and then slowly put down his cup and leaned back, letting the question hang in the air for a long tense minute to Sarutobi's annoyance before he answered. Have you recently talked to him, old man? Sarutobi slowly shook his head. You should. If you do, look into his eyes. Look deep into his eyes and you will find your answer there. Because his eyes reflect his very soul. Always. Don't beat around the bush, Jiraiya. Sarutobi finally snapped, his patience gone. The named man let out a long sigh. Fine, he mumbled. I think he remembers. Probably not everything, but at least some parts of his past. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes, while Jiraiya continued. Is he hiding something? Definitely. Is he a threat to the village? Definitely not. He truly cares for this village, for Minato and Kushina. He cares for me and the two Gaki. He even cares for you. You should hear him. He talks about you with respect and love like you were some kind of grandfather or something. Sarutobi frowned at Jiraiya's finger, which was pointing straight at his chest. Do you think Minato also suspects it? Jiraiya closed his eyes and nodded. Of course. He is an observant little brat. He always was. Now, he is waiting just like me. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes. Then why don't you step in? Jiraiya snorted and shook his head. And then what? Lock him up? Torture him until he confesses or have Inoichi attack his mind until he becomes nuts? Jiraiya shook his head once more. It wouldn't do us any good. That brat is more stubborn than Minato and Kushina together. He won't confess under torture or a simple interrogation. With the old-fashioned way, we would know nothing about him. But if we let him act freely and supervise him from the background, soon he will either slip or we will realize his true intentions if he even has anything like that. The sage sipped from his tea, then continued. But I don't think so. He is a terrible liar. He can act, and even put a real actor to shame, but as soon as a false word slips from his mouth you can see it in his eyes. You can almost touch his shame. He is too honest for a shinobi. So instead of lying completely, he tells half-truths or simply doesn't answer. He is definitely not a spy or a sleeping agent. He is not that type. You can be at ease. His sudden appearance isn't related to any ill intentions toward Konoha, and with time we can put together the pieces of his jigsaw. But what Minato and I both think from all of this is that he is trying to get rid of his past. He is trying hard to earn our acknowledgement and be a valuable member of Konoha. Sarutobi puffed from his pipe and slowly let out the calming smoke into the empty air, a tint of irritation in his voice. Minato trusts that boy too much. A small smile spread on Jiraiya's face. The feeling is mutual. Toriku trusts Minato, and this is why he didn't tell us that he remembers. He didn't want those bonds to falter. Sarutobi closed his eyes and scowled. And you trust him also? Jiraiya didn't answer for a long, silent and also tense minute, waiting his own words before he answered. I do. The third let out a long and weary sigh and rubbed the bridge of his nose in the hope that it would ease away his doubts, but Jiraiya's faint voice kicked him out from his musing. The great Toad Sage summoned me 2 days before I came home and became the Jounin sensei of Minato's old team. The frown deepened on Sarutobi's face, waiting for his student to continue. He told me that he saw a new vision. I think it's about Toriku. The third's eyes widened as he leaned forward, eagerly waiting for Jiraiya to finish. He said that a boy trying to escape from the path of his past will appear in your life. He will bring a new chance and a new tomorrow. That's all he said. Cryptic as always. The frown appeared on the face of Sarutobi, and he closed his old eyes once more to weigh this new information. A new chance for what? Jiraiya shook his head. A new chance to fulfill the prophecy? I don't know. But I want to think it's about that. When Toriku talks about peace, I believe in him, old man. I truly believe that he is able to find that peace. That he can end the circle of hatred, the Toad Sage said slowly, before his seriousness became nowhere to be seen as he sent a wide grin toward his once leader. Do you want to confront him in the future? The Sannin thought about it for a second before he shook his head. Not in the near future. He trusts me. I think he will confess with time. Once, he almost confessed to Minato. I really hope both of you are right. For the sake of my sanity and for the sake of the village. Hey old man, you retired? Let Minato lead this village. He knows what he's doing. So do I. I'm not a stupid immature genin anymore. Jiraiya sent back a cheeky grin, and emptied his cup with one swig. The Sannin grimaced like a child when the hot liquid burned down his throat, making the old leader to let out another long sigh and shake his head in a fatherly way, while his matured student tried to look as grown-up as he could as he choked and coughed. A loud scream echoed inside the Hokage mansion and Naruto was on his feet in the next moment, rushing toward its source with insane speed. Only his last bit of his logical mind restrained him from snatching up some of Kurama's chakra to boost up his speed. In the next second he kicked the door open to jump onto the attacker, only to find none, though his mind became frozen by the sight in front of him. He stared at his mother's lap, where her clothes were soaked with crimson liquid. Her eyes were wide as she just stared down at Minato, who was kneeling on the floor next to their bed, his face as red as Kushina's stained lap. He glared at his brother in obvious annoyance. Naruto's mind raced through several horrifying scenarios while he jumped next to his mother, shoving his father to the side and shaking her shoulder. Who hurt you? Where is the bastard? Kushina blinked herself out from her temporary daze and finally shook Naruto's hands off of her, but she didn't avert her gaze from his father on the ground. However, instead of just staring, she burst out into a hysterical laugh. The smell of alcohol hit Naruto's nose and that was the moment when he decided to finally glance around for real to survey the situation. A broken wine glass rested next to their feet, another next to his father, a half-full bottle laid on the ground in the middle of a growing crimson stain. His father suddenly yelped and immediately started to look for something on the floor until he finally shoved Naruto out from his way. With an excited and relieved sigh he grabbed something from the floor and cleared his throat as Kushina's hysterical laugh died down into small giggles. So, putting this small disturbance to the side, Kushina, I'm still waiting for your answer. The named red-haired woman gulped and an odd expression spread over her fine features. She stepped closer to his father, carefully avoiding the glass shards on the floor and sank down to her knees in front of Minato. Silent tears flowed from her eyes from the emotional roller coaster. The Hokage's muscles tensed during the long wait, his eyes drifting to his still confused brother for a moment, maybe to find some encouragement. In the next moment, Kushina flung herself into his arms, continuously murmuring something into his father's ears between almost silent sobs. But Minato's expression told Naruto that he was in the middle of devastating joy and ecstasy. A wide smile spread across Naruto's face when he finally spotted the small silver ring in his father's fingers. 2 small silver leaves were embracing a purple gem, steadying it in the middle of the jewelry, like parents would do for a child. The blonde teen immediately retreated from the room silently, with the widest smile on his face that he could manage. And suddenly all of his previous anxiety was gone. The future wasn't looking so dark anymore. Chapter 19, Deja Vu. The brawny form of Katsuchi had been shrouding most of the sight of the 4th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato from the curious eyes of the 4 genin teams standing patiently behind the commander, listening to their interaction. One young teen fidgeted from foot to finally get a closer look at the feared village leader, but the only thing he could see behind their giant escort was a glimpse of the man. His form, face and body were obscured continuously by the enormous back. Every time the young ninja's brown eyes had a slight chance to finally have a look at the Hokage's face, Katsuchi moved and the opening was immediately gone. After 10 minutes of constant trying he lost his patience and interest, and so instead left his eyes rest on their escort's back, unfocused. The guards hidden in the room were obviously stressed and tense from the amount of Iwa shinobi in the middle of the Hokage tower. However, the calm and composed attitude of their Kage helped to lighten the mood, despite the many hateful glares he received from the foreign genin who were fortunate enough to stand at a position whose angle allowed them to actually see him. I'm pleased to see this many applicants for the exam. I'm glad that such a kid agreed to finally participate. A small, almost invisible smile appeared on the commander's mostly stern face. Minato clapped his hands, making some of the genins flinch by the sudden noise. Okay, one of my jounin will show you your accommodations. A training ground is reserved for your teams, he will also show you which one. During your stay, you may move freely throughout the village, but I must warn you, fights outside the exam won't be tolerated. The commander and most of the genins nodded. Minato gestured to the corner and a figure stepped out from the shadows, greeting the teams from Iwa with a small nod. Before they could leave the office, Kitsuchi stepped forward. Hokage-sama. With your permission, I would like to meet with Toriko-kun. Minato observed the well-built man in front of him for a long silent moment with an unreadable face, and in the end nodded. Permission of course granted. I won't forbid interaction with any shinobi from Konoha. Minato's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint before he continued. Of course, if there are any incidents, there will be consequences. The Iwa shinobi nodded and left the room, silently following their guide. However, as soon as they stepped through the doorway of Minato's office, several shadows fell in line behind them, lurking behind dark corners, under bushes or between the thick crown of emerald green trees. Anbu guards walked in their shadows the entire way throughout Konoha. Most of the team settled down surprisingly quickly, despite their unknown surroundings. When Kitsuchi finally had the mindset to leave the restless genin alone, he left the room to look for the person he was currently the most interested in. He wandered the streets casually, not sure where he was actually going. His experienced eyes, however, swept his surroundings and an invisible map of Konoha already started to form in his mind. The commander shook his head when one of his genin tripped over something. The one who had been trying to follow him unnoticed ever since he had stepped out from their accommodation. The commander let out a long sigh, then slowly turned around to face the corner of a house where a second ago the boy had peeked over. Come out, Shiko! The boy's shoulders slumped from being caught, and slowly trekked toward his leader, his movement shadowed by their perfectly hidden Anbu guard. The commander watched the boy, who was in his early teens, nervously fidget from foot to foot. Why are you following me? His chocolate brown eyes looked down to his feet in shame, shaded by his brown bangs, even though they were pointing straight toward the sky, defying gravity and every law of nature. I'm bored. His answer was so simple and sincere that Kitsuchi only shook his head once more and waved an inviting hand to the genin to just follow him. A little while later he finally spotted what he was looking for. For shinobi, one of them with a bright blonde mop of hair and a pout on his face trailed after an older man with pure white hair as two more figures, a young man with gravity-defying silver hair and a girl with short, mousy brown locks, watched their argument from behind. They were heading to the outer part of the village, probably to the training grounds. They were quite far away, but he still could hear their loud argument. It was a fair bet. You lost. Just admit it, old man. Jiraiya snorted and folded his arms across his chest dismissively. I don't care. And I hereby close this argument. Plus we've got company. The Toad Sage pointed toward the Iwa commander and his companion with his head, but Naruto didn't care. He had already sensed Kitsuchi minutes ago. He just continued to mumble about untrustworthy old geezers and perverts until they were faced with the giant form of the Iwa commander and the young genin at his side. Each of them shared a quick restrained nod as a greeting. Only Naruto grinned and beckoned enthusiastically. Hey Ajisen. How was your trip? Kitsuchi raised an eyebrow at the honorific, but in the end only shrugged. Eventless. I hope you brought your best genin with you, because we're giving them a long, tough run during the second phase. Naruto grinned at Shiko, who was observing him from head to toe suspiciously, not really caring that he was continuously leaking out a small amount of killer intent. You are one of the examiners? Yeah, thanks to the sissy and his abuse of power. Naruto mumbled with an irritated pout. The Iwa commander frowned in his confusion, while the silver-haired Jounin fought to restrain his chuckle. Naruto, behave. These are foreign ninja, not the man you once fought alongside. Don't just joke around. Plus you are abusing Minato's reputation. The blonde Chunin let out a perished sigh. The fox was right and he was acting like a 10-year-old kid again, not thinking about the Hokage's status. Naruto finally gathered himself and cleared his throat. So what brought you to me anyway? I won't tell you any details about the exam. I want fair play. I don't really know actually. Kakashi sent a sharp and suspicious glance toward the giant man, while Jiraiya and Rin watched the interaction with calm, but observant eyes from the side. The huge man never looked at Kakashi directly in the eyes, always just somewhere near eye level. Probably to restrain his urge to do something he would regret later. Kakashi sent a sharp and narrow glance toward the young genin, who was still staring at the blonde. The piercing look instantly washed away the killing intent from the boy's direction, who in response changed the focus of his attention to the young jounin, glaring daggers at him. Naruto shook his head at the scene and ruffled the silver locks of Kakashi, to his great annoyance. We were heading to the training grounds for a small spar. You can join if you would like to. Before the genin could retort, Kitsuchi nodded, following the small team toward their destination. The Iwa commander and his sulking young companion settled down at the edge of the clearing, not too far away from the rest of the team, watching as the blonde Chunin sent an annoyed glare when the Sannin whispered something to him. The blonde shook his head, folded his arms across his chest and started sulking like a 10-year-old child, even stomping his feet to the ground. The Battle of Wills didn't last long, and in the end the young shinobi gave up and nodded in his acceptance, flinging his arms high into the air in defeat, though the irritation never left his face. Jiraiya slowly went to Rin's side and also settled down along the tree line, with a distance between them and the foreign duo. Her face was calm, but her eyes observed them suspiciously. "What did you say to Toriko-kun, sensei?" Her voice was as soft as a whisper to hide their conversation. "To hold back and not show off. The less Iwai knows about his abilities the better. His rank as a chunin makes everybody underestimate him. I told him to let Kakashi win." Rin nodded and turned her head back to her comrades. The spar was light, their movement fluid, both of them aware of the calculating eyes from the edge of the clearing. However, Naruto was annoyed. He had prepared a good move just for Kakashi this time, and because of the pervert he wouldn't be able to pull it out. Or maybe if he shook his head in irritation, dismissing the idea, as he restrained his instinct to deflect a kick from Kakashi. He didn't even have to concentrate on the battle. Kakashi was also holding back. Naruto made one more annoyed grimace. The whole fight was starting to become pointless. They were just toying with each other, and he became more and more frustrated as he let Kakashi land a hit on his spine. And to let Kakashi beat him? He snarled angrily from the thought. Kitsuchi watched the duo from his spot and restrained the urge to narrow his eyes. His gaze was locked on Kakashi, who was obviously holding back, just playing with the blonde in the light spar. He noted the increasing frustration in his previous captive's eyes when the Jounin managed to land more and more hits. The blonde suddenly blocked a well-aimed kick, and Kitsuchi's eyes widened for a second when he noted that the boy wasn't even paying attention to the fight, his blue eyes drifting to the Sannin from time to send a set of imaginary daggers toward him. Moreover, he winced when he deflected the attack. He was frustrated because he had to hold back. But they were fighting on Chunin level. It made no sense to him. Why would a Chunin level fight irritate a Chunin? Not only that, the blonde had noted a successful deflect as a mistake. The Iwa shinobi narrowed his eyes when realization hit him. "This sissy sucks." Kitsuchi didn't answer the genin's remark. It wasn't the Jounin who held the upper level. It was Toriku, who swept the attack to the side as easily as it was just a child's plaything. It didn't matter how much he tried to hide it. He was holding back. And not just by a little. From the moment he realized this, the commander watched the fight from a new, calculating perspective. When they finally stopped the spar with Kakashi on top, pointing a kunai at the obviously angry and frustrated blonde, the sun was already high above the horizon, closer to the end of the day than to the beginning. Kitsuchi and his young companion trailed after the still annoyed Chunin soundlessly, the larger man's eyes fixed on teenager's back, still eagerly calculating the real strength of the blonde, while his genin was still glaring daggers. They reached the city center soundlessly. Jiraiya and Rin excused themselves fairly quickly and left, but the Sannin sent a warning glare to Naruto before his departure. The Chunin rolled his eyes in answer, then stretched his arms behind his neck and let out a satisfied moan when one of his joints popped back to its proper place. "I'm starving." Kakashi rolled his one visible eye in annoyance. "You are always starving." Naruto shrugged casually and an evil smirk appeared on his face. "Hey Kakashi. It's your turn to pay." The named Jounin narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Why would I? You can propitiate me for my wounded pride." The silver-haired teen snorted at the dramatic voice, and shook his head enthusiastically. "I haven't got that much money." The teen shrugged, accepting his defeat quite quickly and glanced up to the huge Iwa commander. "Are you hungry, Kitsuchi-aja-san? I know a good place." Shiko snorted, forcing the blonde to move his sight to the small and angry form of the young genin, who sent another set of imaginary daggers toward the blonde. "Like we would eat with you." Naruto's head slipped to the side, watching the child with a wondering expression on his face. "And why would you say that?" "Because you are who you are." The child sent a narrow and hateful glare. "And exactly who am I? Are you an idiot? We are from Iwa. You are from Konoha. The leaf killed hundreds of our comrades in the last war. The same goes for Iwa. Why are you doing this? Why don't you want vengeance for your dead comrades? Where is the eye for an eye? Why are you acting so friendly?" Naruto stayed silent, carefully observing the child in front of him. His eyes burned with hatred for everyone who carried the owl leaf insignia. Finally he opened his mouth to answer. "An eye for an eye is the same as the spiral of death. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Do you want to become blind too? Don't you want to instead see the future?" The blonde Chunin said quietly, but his words were still strong even in its low tone. Then his seriousness was gone in the next second as he suddenly tapped the commander on his back in a friendly, and casual way. That's why I don't care that you are from Iwa. And you shouldn't either. We are all the same. We are shinobi. The genin's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in his shock. The stunned commander made an amused snort and a small, half-smile appeared on his face. So be it. Lead the way, Toriko-kun. A satisfied wide grin appeared on Naruto's fine features and he grabbed the still shocked genin to drag him through half of the village, not concerned in the slightest by his struggle, his threats, his killing intent or his pathetic attempts to attack him and force him to let him go. Naruto simply dragged him all the way in a headlock until they reached Ichiraku's ramen stand, where he finally let the teen free. The entire way only the younger teens' displeased shouting, groans and bitching could be heard. Kakashi and Kitsuchi trailed behind them silently, each with an amused expression on his face. Naruto hopped down to the counter, and 5 minutes later he dug deep into a steaming bowl of ramen. The commander watched from the corner of his eye as his genin and the blonde chunin continued their bickering when they finished their bowl, each in their own manner. His genin sulking and pouting, while Toriko ate as if he was slurping the food of the gods. It was odd. The scene was so pleasant it almost unnerved him. Shiko was in the process of absolutely forgetting that he was talking to a foreign shinobi, the one who he wanted to skin alive half an hour ago, just because of instincts. Their laughter filled the small stand and even the up till then restrained Hatake Kakashi joined in the conversation, but his one visible eye was on high alert every time he glanced at the brawny shinobi on the other end of the counter. Well, what do we have here? Bonding between the nations. I like that scene. The commander tensed when a new voice reached him and another blonde stepped into the small stand. He was close. He was too close for Kitsuchi's liking. Shiko glanced back at the newcomer with an annoyed expression on his face for interrupting their chat while the blonde chunin only grinned and waved. Hello, Tuchi-san. The usual if you would be so kind. Minato smiled at the named man, who nodded with a knowing smile on his face and made a bow behind the counter after his eyes traveled to the two foreign shinobi. Minato casually sat down on the last empty seat between Kakashi and his relative, not concerned by the sudden silence and tensed muscles from the Iwa commander and the curious but also annoyed glance from the foreign genin. He acted informally, even his appearance was casual. He had left his white coat back at the office. Only his normal jounin attire was on his body. Kakashi wondered if his sudden appearance and his looks were intentional. It was more than likely. His sensei never did anything without a reason. As the Hokage's meal finally arrived and he started eating silently, the tension slowly died down and a light chat took over the previous heavy silence. Kakashi made a mental nod. His sensei was trying to ease the tension between the two nations. Before he could continue, a poke at his shoulder kicked him out from his musing. Hey Kakashi! Don't you want to spar when we finish? I want a rematch for my broken pride. Naruto's voice was low and cocky, but Minato could still hear it, raising a confused eyebrow from the words. Rematch? Minato glanced back at Kakashi with a raised eyebrow, who nodded, but before his student could explain anything further and save an embarrassing unveil, the Iwa genin answered to the Hokage's question. He beat the sissy to the ground during their spar. You beat Toriku? Finally Kakashi-kun, I'm so proud of you! Minato clapped his student on the back, who simply slammed his palm on his forehead, shaking it slowly. How on earth could his sensei be this dense sometimes? It was so rare when he did that, but when it happened, it was always at the worst time. Sensei. The jounin groaned and slowly shook his head in disbelief once again, watching as his leader's smile faltered, when his eyes traveled toward the commander and the genin at his side. In the end he simply terminated the awkward moment with a casual shrug. Kitsuchi restrained a wide and satisfied grin. So he was right. The blonde is the stronger one, and his defeat was only to deceive them. The blonde chunin's loud laugh filled the small place, kicking out everybody from his own musing, earning an annoyed and confused glare from the Iwa genin. What's so funny? You suck. If every chunin in Konoha is like you, then even I can kick your Hokage's butt. A sly but altogether cheeky smile spread across Minato's face as he leaned onto the counter to rest his chin in his palm and have a better viewpoint of his victim, eyeing the child from head to toe, unconcerned with the amused snort from his brother and his student, nor the widened eyes of the Iwa commander. Oh, you think so? Minato asked with a sing-song voice, his free hand playing with his chopsticks, watching as the genin snorted, folded his arms in front of his chest and answered with a determined expression on his face. Definitely. I can arrange a spar with the Hokage for you. Minato continued playing with his chopsticks casually, and sent a warning side glance to Kakashi, who opened his mouth to scold the child. The genin also moved his lips to retort, when Minato sent him a sly, provoking smirk, but Kitsuchi's low, almost unnoticeable voice stopped the genin from answering to the challenge. Shiko-kun. You didn't see the village leader when we were in the office, did you? The genin glanced up to the commander and shrugged. No. You were always right in front of me. But my uncle said that he once had met him on a mission before he retired some years ago. He told me that he fought while his hair was dyed pink. What Kage wannabe dyes his hair pink? He must be some fashion junkie pansy boy. His only answer was silence, forcing the boy to glance back to the frozen audience with a questioning look on his face. What? Naruto burst out with whining laughter as a response, continuously patting his frozen leader's back as Minato's sly smirks slowly slipped to the side, while Kakashi disappeared under the counter to hide his reaction. However, Naruto didn't have that kind of restraint. His guffaws filled the small ramen stand and most likely echoed around several streets in the district, and he had to grab his side when it started to sting by the force. Oh! He is a fashion junkie for sure! He finally managed to choke out between two barking laughs. Hey! Minato snorted and sent an angry and annoyed glare to his brother, who didn't look the least bit concerned about the Yondaime's narrowed eyes, defensively folded arms, or the slowly increasing killing intent sent to his hysterical brother. Katsuchi watched the scene with an open mouth. He struggled between fearing for his genin's life and being amused by the Hokage's obviously embarrassing situation. I was pranked by Kushina for crying out loud. Minato grumbled behind his gritted teeth, but his voice was suppressed by Naruto's increasing laughter, which was very slowly dying down into small chuckles, while Minato's whole face turned bright red. Even his ears flamed in the crimson color. I remember that. Kurama let out a loud snicker in his mindscape. She had sneaked inside his tent while he was sleeping. Hey, can you show it to me somehow? The fox slowly shook his head between two snickers, and Naruto made a disappointed mental pout. But he immediately brightened when an idea popped up in his head. We should repeat that. I want to see. If you try, you will die. Minato answered back with a stern and emotionless face and also sent a cold glare, but his brother only winked with a cheeky smile. His threatening and stern expression wasn't as effective as Minato originally intended with that massive blush on his face. The confused genin glanced back and forth between the shinobi in front of him, with a frown on his young face. However, before he could open his mouth to ask what the hell is going on, a man in chunin attire stepped inside the ramen stand and made a bow, patiently waiting for Minato to pay attention to him. The older blonde finally gathered himself and looked over his shoulder to let out a long sigh at the sight of the gate guard. Yeah? The participants from Kiri have arrived at the gates, Minato-sama. The genin narrowed his eyes at the scene, observing it silently. Thank you. I'm coming. The Kage stretched his arms behind his neck, waiting for the familiar popping sound from his joints, then turned to his brother with narrowed eyes. I was serious. If you try it, you will be executed for treason. Even if you just think about it. The chunin snorted, rolled his eyes, and turned away from his father with a pout on his face. Katsuchi-san, I'm sorry I have to go. The commander nodded with a slightly open mouth as a farewell, still somewhat shocked, watching as Minato winked at the still confused genin and walked out from the stand, his hands casually buried deep inside his pockets after he sent one last warning glare to his brother. It would still be worth a try, he is just bluffing. The commander turned his head toward the muttering blonde chunin with disbelief on his face. He couldn't be serious, could he? Pranking the Hokage? Then he thought back to the last few minutes. Everything was so different than what he first thought when the Hokage had stepped inside the stand. He was carefree, friendly, cheerful and casual. He wasn't behaving like what the rumors had about him. He wasn't a cold-hearted killer. He was powerful. He would never deny it. Even when embarrassed to death, Katsuchi could still feel the powerful aura hovering around him continuously. Like there were two different personalities in that man. Calm and powerful when he acted like a Kage, like during the Iwanin's captivity, and now without his hat he was so casual and friendly, like anyone else. Maybe they weren't as different as he first thought. Shiko's voice kicked him out from his musing. Who was that guy? Naruto burst out laughing again and waved a dismissive hand. My brother. Is he also one of the Chunin exam proctors? Kakashi opened his mouth to answer, but Naruto silenced him by clapping his hand over his mouth with a cheeky smile on his face as he winked at the Iwa commander while he answered. Yeah, something like that. Katsuchi slowly shook his head and let out a long sigh. Come on, Shiko, we should get back. You'll have a long day tomorrow. They left the stand, followed by Kakashi's narrowed gaze. He and Naruto stayed there for a little while longer before they also departed toward the Hokage Tower. They didn't speak until they reached their destination, only walked side by side silently in the late afternoon's crowded streets. But apparently Kakashi lost his patience and his composure as he let out his worrying thoughts. What's wrong with you? Both of you were acting like nothing had happened. Like he didn't kidnap you, or try to kill us. Kakashi, real strength isn't measured with strong jutsus. The real strength of a person is his willpower. He is stronger than you if he has the strength to forgive. You should also seek that kind of power. The Jonin imperceptibly flinched, and stayed silent for a long minute before he finally turned his head toward the blonde teen. If someone killed your friend, would you be able to forgive? Naruto observed the teen cautiously, and he really hoped that the roller coaster of his emotions couldn't be seen on his face. He had been able to forgive Nagato. Was he really ready to forgive Obito if he faced him? Was he ready to save him from the darkness? The blonde chewed on his lower lips before he answered. I am willing to forgive and save any soul from the circle of hatred. Kakashi frowned. He hadn't actually answered in theory. It was a sheer statement. A declaration maybe to himself. A sudden new presence stopped the flood of his thoughts. He turned his head to the side to face 3 genin teams from Kiri, heading toward the Hokage Tower. Obviously the teams the Chunin Guard had informed Minato about. Naruto glanced around them, observing the members carefully, one by one. So many young children. His eyes locked on the smallest one, and he had to restrain a gasp. He couldn't be more than 10. Probably less, maybe 8? His eyes wandered toward the tallest one, the leader of the genin teams. Naruto blinked, and only his last bit of self-control kept him from simply dropping to the ground and landing on his ass in his surprise with open mouth in a not very shinobi way. His eyes were fixed on a half-bandaged face and stern, stabbing eyes until his gaze wandered toward the Hittite with the 4 waving lines. He couldn't help himself, he just stared directly into his face silently with an open mouth. The young foreign shinobi narrowed his eyes and stepped out from the group to stand in front of Naruto, leaning into his personal space until they were only centimeters from each other. The Chunin restrained an amused snort when he realized that the shinobi had risen onto his toes just to be at eye level with him, but the proper amount of killing intent waved away his amusement in the next second, though only for a brief moment, before it returned with increased strength. Why are you staring at me, Blondie? You want something from me? Naruto's eyes finally wandered away from his face to land on his Jounin vest for a second, before he started to look for the familiar giant sword on his back, but it seemed he hadn't gained it yet. What are you looking behind my back for? Naruto cleared his throat, to gather himself and to hide an amused snort, but he felt Kakashi's smaller hands between their bodies pushing them slightly away from each other. Sorry, but the Blondie is mine, Shrimp. Confrontation between the genin outside of the exam is prohibited. I suggest you go and register your teams inside the Hokage Tower instead of bothering named Blondie. Stern and cold black eyes wandered toward the newcomer, observing the young teen prodigy next to him for a long silent moment. Oh, I'm pleased. Spiky silver hair, half-face mask, Hittite on his left eye. One of the youngest shinobi who managed to get into the bingo books. If the rumors and descriptions are true, you must be Hatake Kakashi. B-rank Jounin. The named teen raised an eyebrow. And you would be? Momochi Zabuza, demon of the hidden mist. The silver-haired teen narrowed his eye, observing his opponent more aware than before. You were the last one who graduated by the old system. It was you who forced the Mizukage to reform it. I'm glad my reputation reaches this far. He leaned toward Kakashi, in the same way he had toward Naruto a minute before, but his movement froze midway when Naruto couldn't restrain himself anymore and burst out in a loud laugh. Anger rose inside Zabuza's chest, and he immediately turned toward the still almost girlishly giggling blonde teen. Do you think it's funny? Naruto only waved a hand, finally composing himself. No, of course not. I just got déjà vu. The blonde shrugged, waving a hand with a grin on his face, and left the more surprised than angry Kiri Jounin with Kakashi to head toward the top story of the Hokage Tower. Maybe this is going to be more fun than I thought. Naruto glanced around the crowded room from next to the wall where he'd been sitting since the first round of the Chunin selection exams had started. His eyes wandered toward the dark figure of Makoto behind the desk on the large podium. It was strange. Everything seemed so damn familiar. The previous hour triggered the memories of his own exam. The nostalgia and the almost continuous déjà vu overwhelmed every single one of his senses. He watched with foggy eyes when 2 instructors had distracted the genin teams and sent some of them to a wrong building, the bickering in the corridors between 2 boys from Leaf, and he had to restrain a loud snicker with a cough when a small girl with purple hair and a Leaf insignia hopped onto the table on the podium and challenged every single person inside the room with a loud roar. Oh, Anko! His reactions weren't missed by the head interrogator, and Naruto was sure that after the second part of the exam was finished, he would be summoned for another short session with Inoichi, or at least a long talk with his father, which was more likely to happen. The named interrogator glanced toward him, and their eyes locked for a second before Naruto sent a foxy grin toward him, The scarred man rolled his eyes in response. The blonde Chunin turned his head back to the row he was assigned to watch and grimaced when a genin from Kumo made his last mistake and lost the chance to participate on the next session. With perfect aim, his hand shot forward, and in the next second a shuriken embedded itself into the hard surface of the table in front of the shocked genin. 6, 12, and 36 are out. The three genin left the room, sending hateful glances toward him, the tingling sensation of their killing intent finally dying down when they left the room after one last stabbing look. Naruto shook his head and let out a sigh, while his eyes moved back to the gap-toothed row. Every genin had gotten at least one mark on the sheet in the first 10 minutes, except one. The row on his clipboard for notes about the purple-haired loud-mouthed girl was still blank. Anko was damn good. He had to admit, Orochimaru did a good job with her training. His mind wandered back to the past. When they had found the exhausted girl on the edge of the once proud Leaf Village, they had thought she was dead. No one had known about her mission to follow Kabuto. After her recovery, she had jumped into the battles without hesitation. She fought like a wild tiger. Vengeance burned her coils from within until the old Reaper had finally claimed her during one of the last battles. A frown appeared on his face when an old mystery pushed itself into his thoughts. Her curse seal of heaven had simply disappeared from her neck without any trace of it ever having been there, but she hadn't been able to give any explanations for it. She had been unconscious for a long time after they'd found Kabuto, and she never recovered any memories about what had happened. Maybe it wasn't his imagination. Orochimaru's chakra signature was really there? Naruto shook his head to clear his thoughts. None of that had happened yet. None of them were going to happen. It didn't matter now. He restrained a snort when he noticed a small puddle of water, slowly rippling down from one of the higher rows toward its destination on the floor. His eyes swept around, trailing the wet line back from the puddle until he found the source. A boy maybe around 14, long black hair and with a scuba mask? Naruto narrowed his eyes when the puddle finally stopped under an almost identical-looking boy. His eyes traveled back and forth between the two figures, and when he noted the two similar iron claws on their hands, realization hit him like thunder. He masked his laugh with a cough when he noticed a giant spot on the cheek of one of them, and thanks to another Chunin's sharp eyes, the demon brothers left the room in the next minute after a well-aimed kunai stuck into the wood of the table. He winked at the young boy from Iwa who he'd shared his ramen with yesterday, but he received only a snort and he immediately turned back to his paper. Naruto let out a sigh and continued his watch for opportunities to reduce the numbers. Naruto channeled more chakra into his legs and leaped high in the air to land gracefully on a thick branch deep inside the forest of death to get a better viewpoint. It was already the third day of the exam, and his barrier and trap seals had caught more teams than he expected. After all, he had made them to be on a level where the teams could spot them and even counter them if they were sneaky enough. His experienced eyes watched as a genin team from Kumo fought their battle to defend their scroll from a Leaf team, the one led by the very noisy Anko. Naruto grimaced as Snake shot forward from the child's arms to grab a foreign ninja and toss him to the ground. The scroll from his hand rolled out to disappear under a thick bush. Naruto suddenly stiffened when someone revealed himself from behind his back. His instincts kicked in, and with speed that even Minato would appreciate, he whirled around with a kunai already in his hand to face the newcomer. He felt as a cold sweat slowly ran down his spine when he found himself face to face with one of the Sannin who was currently grasping his wrist to stop the attack only millimeters from his face, which was occupied with a smug smile. "Jumpy, aren't we?" Naruto shook off the ice-cold hand, and took several steps backward to gain as much distance as he could manage on the branch without falling off as his thoughts raced with insane speed. He hadn't felt him. Again. That damn bastard had been able to sneak up on him again. No one was able to do that when he is on high alert, only Minato and his times Kakashi. Nobody else. Yet here he was. He'd been fooled again. He'd underestimated that bastard again. My, suddenly so silent. By the rumors, that's not like you, Torikakuin. Naruto narrowed his eyes, watching every movement of the Sannin carefully. I'm not in the mood to chit-chat. A half-smile spread across Orochimaru's face as he eyed his companion silently. In the next second he averted his gaze and glanced down to the battle at their feet. I just came to check up on my student. Naruto didn't move his eyes off of him, not even for a second to look down. She is doing well. The Kumo team has already lost, they just don't know it yet. At that moment, an explosion shook the lands at their feet and he couldn't restrain himself. Naruto glanced down to check on what was happening as debris shot up to where they stood. The trap Anko and her team had set up before the ambush finally triggered. After noting the scene below, he immediately glanced back to check on the snake, whose gaze was locked on him once again. The Sannin turned and very slowly approached him. Naruto hadn't moved, His muscles tensed to the breaking point as the pale man came closer and closer to pass beside him on the thick branch. But the snake stopped next to him to whisper into his ears. "You are a very interesting young man, Torakakun." His lean fingers slowly reached toward his cheek to trace one of his whisker marks, and to touch a small trail of blood that flowed from a scratch by the debris Naruto wasn't even aware of. However, when he felt the cold touch on his skin, he immediately moved and twisted out from his reach. A sly smile appeared on the snake's face, but in the next second it disappeared as he turned to Naruto casually, a curious expression on his face. "The human body is a fascinating machine." The Sannin trailed off for a second, his face becoming thoughtful as he glanced up to the sky, then he glanced back to his companion. "I'm interested in some of your equally fascinating abilities, Torakakun. Especially in your increased healing ability that you've hidden well until now. Not the one everybody knows about, the one you've awakened only recently. The one that can grow new tissues in mere seconds." Orochimaru pointed a finger toward his cheek and Naruto unconsciously raised his hand to ease away the cold feeling that was still lingering on his skin. The small cut was already gone. "When the second round of the exams is over, I would like to ask for your cooperation in some of my research." Naruto felt as his eyes bulged out from his skull. He had thought the snake was going to attack him, try to knock him out, to do whatever he was planning to do with him, but to ask him openly to cooperate. The blonde narrowed his eyes and measured up the Sannin suspiciously from head to toe. "And why would I cooperate with you?" Orochimaru shrugged casually. "I found some really interesting things about you which could give you some answers about your lost past." Naruto folded his arms across his chest dismissively and narrowed his eyes. "I'm not interested." A sly smile spread across Orochimaru's gaze, before he shrugged and turned around to walk away. "It's a shame. Then maybe Minato-kun will be more concerned with why his brother has a 50% match with his beloved Kushina-chan's DNA." A sudden rush of adrenaline ran through Naruto's veins as he reached forward to grab and stop the Sannin. "Wait!" A low chuckle left Orochimaru as he slowly turned around and noted the worry in the azure-blue eyes. "Oh. It seems that this isn't a surprise to you. More likely it's worrying you." Naruto narrowed his eyes to slits and took a step backward to regain their previous distance. "Well, it seems your lost memories aren't as lost as everybody thinks. Am I right, Torakakun?" Another set of creepy chuckles bubbled out of Orochimaru at seeing the boy's telling wince. "What do you want from me?" "Some blood and tissue samples for my research. That will be enough for a time. If you cooperate, your little secret will be safe with me. Wait for me after the second round." "How do I know that you haven't already run to Jiraiya or to Minato?" The snake answered with a sinister smile. "You don't know." With this last statement, the Sannin disappeared with a shunshin, leaving the still shocked teen alone with his disturbed thoughts and some slowly whirling leaves. Naruto sank down on the branch as his knees gave up the battle to hold his weight, his legs hanging freely in the air while his arms clutched his head to ruffle through his blonde locks in his annoyance and fury. Enko's team had left the clearing sometime during in the middle of their confrontation. The only thing which disturbed the unnatural silence around him was the rhythmical breathing of the unconscious team from Kumo. He murmured softly into the silent woods. "What should we do now, Kurama?" The fox stayed in silence for a long minute, gathering his own thoughts. "Have you ever heard the saying, keep your friends close but your enemies closer?" Naruto snorted, and opened his mouth to respond, but he was silenced by a wave of an enormous tail in his mindscape. "The fact that he knows about your connection with Kushina is disturbing, but it also gives us an opportunity. We can keep a close eye on him, and we can finally know about his hideouts. And don't talk aloud. Who knows who else can sneak up on us in this timeline? We can't make the same mistake twice." "He thinks I have a bloodline or something." Kurama nodded in his mindscape as a response. "Why does he ask for my permission? Why didn't he simply try to knock me out and drag me along? Don't you think it would be suspicious? The disappearance of one of the proctors would bring too much attention to him as the head supervisor. The Forest of Death is a dangerous place, but not for you, and Minato also knows this. So I should just walk inside the snake's nest willingly and cheerfully? Don't mince my words. Willingly but prepared. We are strong. We can get rid of him easily, or at least mark his hideout. What if he tells them? Why would he? Currently he thinks he can benefit more if they don't know." Naruto let out a long and weary sigh, running his hand through his golden locks. His eyes wandered down to the unconscious Kumo team, when he heard a soft rustle behind the large bushes and the thick smell of a predator reached his nose. Another sigh left his lips, then he jumped down gracefully just in time to face with the giant tiger at the edge of the thick woods, who currently preparing to get an easy meal. Azure eyes snapped to the Cid when the pale-faced exam supervisor turned his head, and he felt the stabbing glance on his body. Orochimaru sent a sinister smirk down to Naruto from the balcony, who let out a low growl from the back of his throat and instead focused his sight on the genins who stood next to him, waiting impatiently for Minato to finally appear and close the second round of the exams. He glanced up to the giant statue showing a hand sign. Sweet nostalgia rushed through him one more time and finally distracted him from his thoughts about Orochimaru's blackmail. His eyes lingered on the teams. So many children made it, just like back then. 7 genin teams stood straight and proud in the middle of the battle ring, unaware of the preliminary round that was surely to come. Their numbers were just too high. The final battles would last too long. Just like before. 2 squads managed to finish the second stage from Konoha and 1 each from Iwa, Suna, Kiri, and Kumo. Only 1 team managed to pass the second stage from the smaller countries, the squad from Takigakure. Naruto rested his eyes on a very small child from that team, maybe not more than 10. The girl suddenly turned around. She probably felt his curious gaze on her side. She looked so familiar. She even felt familiar. Shoulder-length mint green hair framed her chubby and childish face. Big orange eyes narrowed suspiciously when he sent a wide grin after being caught. She rolled her childish eyes in response and turned back her to previous observation. She is the container of Komiai. The 7-tailed beast. Naruto winced. She looks so young. She just looks premature. She's always looked like a teen even when she was over 20. He felt a tug at his clothes, forcing him out from his musing to glance down. A weary-looking Shiko looked up at him with obvious annoyance from behind the dirt and scratches on his face. When will your Hokage arrive? It's irritating. I want to finally see him. Now. Naruto rolled his eyes when he heard Minato's cocky voice behind his back and turned around to face his father, who had appeared just in time at his permanent seal to hear the genin's question. The Yondaime stepped to the side and winked at the stunned Iwa genin once more, before he gracefully walked toward the small stage in front of the giant statue. His white long coat elegantly followed the rhythm of his fluid steps, while Shiko's eyes were frozen on the giant red kanji on its back, shouting away his true identity. Yan Yondaime ho Hokage? The genin stuttered to himself. See? I told you, he is a fashion junkie. Naruto sent a reassuring grin to Shiko, who was stunned and shocked to his very core, and couldn't remove his wide eyes from the softly smiling Minato as the man watched over the genin teams from the raised platform. But in the end, Shiko still managed a slow, small nod in agreement. The blonde leader cleared his throat and started his speech about the alliance between nations, the peace, the war, and also the importance of acceptance and forgiveness. Naruto's mind wandered off, his eyes moving toward the Jounin sensei and escorts of the teams silently standing at the background. His eyes narrowed when he spotted the black figure of Danzo, lurking in the shadows, his gaze lingering on the members of the 2 Konoha teams. He is probably looking for new potential recruits for Root. Naruto made a mental nod, but he had to stop any further thoughts as shocked and angry murmurs ran through the genin. A wide, nostalgic grin spread across Naruto's face. Oh yeah? The same reaction as ours when we were told about the preliminaries. When the murmuring finally died down and the mood settled into a determined waiting, none of the genin volunteered to leave the exams. The fights will start after a 10-minute break. Let me remind you one more time. I don't want any unnecessary and pointless deaths. All of us have suffered enough loss in the war. During the matches you must either knock your opponent out or he must forfeit. If you kill your opponent you will be disqualified. Think of it as a mission you could be appointed when you become a Chunin. Assassination is the rarest kind of mission your village will give you. After Minato's announcement the crowd slowly started to move up to the wide balcony, and he felt another tug. Naruto let out a sigh before he looked down at the angry Shiko. Why didn't you tell me who he was? I made a complete idiot of myself. Naruto sent back a cocky smile. It was just too hilarious to watch. Don't be afraid. He doesn't bite. The cocky smile morphed into a smirk. Mostly. The genin grimaced, and they moved together up the stairs. Hey Shiko, if you pass the preliminaries I'll pay for your ramen later. The genin snorted and passed the Hokage with flaming red ears, his thoughts wandering back to a week ago, while Naruto stopped and stayed in the background to have a word with Minato before the preliminaries started. As soon the Hokage gave his last order, Naruto moved closer to whisper into his ears. The small girl from Takigakure has the 7 tails sealed inside her. Minato glanced back with a calm face and sent back a soft smile. We know about her. We were informed in advance so we wouldn't take it as a threat, but thanks for your concern. Naruto nodded and hopped down to the middle of the battle ring to announce the first fight, only to a minute later move back to the balcony to watch from a distance, prepared to interfere if necessary. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have to wait too long. The first fight was over in 5 minutes and the next 2 finished almost equally fast. These genin were strong. They were more trained and experienced than his generation was back then. But it was most likely because of the war. Finally, it was a familiar head's turn to face her opponent. Enko hopped down from the balcony to land in a graceful crouch to face the sand genin. The first part of their fight was most likely fooling around, based on the sour grimace on Orochimaru's face. Enko was playing with the boy in his early teens and, to his annoyance, the small girl deflected his every attack with ease. Naruto made a grimace when Enko finally decided to attack seriously, and a set of familiar snakes shot forward from her arms, twisting around the terrified boy. But in the next blink, the boy was gone in a puff of smoke, his body was replaced by a wooden chair, and the panting boy reappeared in the chair's previous place next to Naruto and Minato on the balcony. "Get down here, you pansy! I'm not finished with you!" Enko's harsh but childish voice sent a shiver down the boy's spine, and after a second of consideration he simply gave up the fight. He made the right decision. His reserves were running low, not to mention the multiple wounds on his body from the previous 5 days in the woods. Naruto watched as Shiko knocked out his opponent in the next round with a flashy earth jutsu. To the child's great annoyance, Naruto gave him a pat on the back as he passed by after the fight. As the end of the fights came closer and closer, Naruto became more and more nervous, and he began to send more and more sidelong glances toward Orochimaru. Each fleeting second seemed to pass by unbelievingly fast. One more round. Naruto forced his senses back to the battle at his feet. 2 boys were fighting, one from Iwa, the other from Kumo. Naruto narrowed his gaze when the flames of hatred dulled the Cloud Nin's eyes when the genin trapped Shiko's teammate, a kunai already at his throat, threatening to slice through his flesh. "Give up!" The jeopardized boy narrowed his eyes, he obviously wouldn't forfeit willingly. Naruto let out a sigh at the stubborn child, but his eyes widened when the Kumo boy pressed the blade closer to the struggling boy, painting a thin red line across his throat with his dangerous metal brush. Shiko's teammate froze, his eyes widened with horror, when the winner leaned closer and pressed the blade even further and started talking. Most likely only Naruto's sensitive ears picked up what he whispered into the boy's ears. "I was really hoping you wouldn't forfeit, son of Saramara Unki. I will get my revenge on you from my father. I will make Chunin in the next exam." The Cloud Genin's muscles tensed, his nerves already sending the signals to move his arm, kunai in hand, to the side and make a perfect slice, but before his muscles could obey the direction, a strong hand wrapped around his wrist, stopping him in his attempt. "The winner of this match is Yu Takagawa Takiji. Now release him," Naruto stated coldly, his hand still gripping the genin's tense wrist, eyeing him with narrowed eyes. The boy snarled back in his anger and sent a furious glare in reply. After a long silent moment, the Kumo nin finally took a step backward, and only then did Naruto release his grip and let the boy disappear. The Iwa genin closed his eyes and slumped to the ground, gripping his bleeding neck, his eyes staring in front of him unfocused as the adrenaline suddenly rushed out of his body. When the medics arrived, together with the worried Shiko and Katsuchi, the boy finally gathered himself enough to glance up to his savior. How did you know he was going to kill me?" Naruto shrugged. "I heard what he told to you." The boy nodded and made a small bow. Thank you." Naruto grinned back and returned to the balcony to discuss his interference with his father. His steps were followed by the curious eyes of Katsuchi. When everything settled down, the crowd started to disappear as Minato announced the date and pairs for the next and final round and disappeared within the next blink. As the teams were also leaving one by one, Naruto glanced around nervously, looking for the snake, but he couldn't find him. He walked to the side and leaned against the wall, waiting patiently for the last shinobi to leave the place while he utilized the opportunity to have a decent plan as to what the hell he was going to do. Before any useful plan could be forged in his mind, he was kicked out from his mindscape when pale and lean fingers dropped onto his shoulders. "Shall we go, Toriko-kun?" When Naruto opened his eyes, he was faced with Orochimaru's excited and predatory smile. That was the last thing he saw, before they disappeared from the middle of the forest of death with a swirl of leaves. Chapter 20. Inside the Snake Pit. Naruto immediately shook the icy hand from his shoulder when he felt solid ground under his feet again, twisting to the side. However, his graceful movement faltered as he bumped into a long wooden table slumping under papers, files, scrolls, flasks, and an insurmountable number of various glass vials filled with colorful liquids. Naruto's heart rate increased as he received a sudden rush of adrenaline when his eyes met with an unidentifiable creature's body in a big glass cylinder, motionlessly floating in a yellowish liquid. "Still jumpy around me, I'll take that as a compliment. Where are we?" He wanted to ask the fox in his mindscape, but the question slipped out from his mouth aloud as he turned around to face the Sannin. "In one of my laboratories under Konoha," Orochimaru answered casually while he motioned toward a door at the end of the room. "Just play along, Remember the plan we discussed? Naruto narrowed his eyes but followed the Sannin to the next room, which contained the same sight. Only one thing was different. There was a metal examining table at the back of the room. The laboratory was different than what Naruto originally had imagined of the snake's nest, where the man had done his nasty experiments with Yamato Taicho and countless others. It was absolutely nothing like he had expected. The place was clean like a hospital instead of a dirty cave, the walls covered with white tiles. The most suspicious things were the dissected animals soundlessly floating in some kind of liquid. He couldn't find any bodies hanging from the ceiling, or cells holding wailing captives. Nor could he see any blood stains in the room. It was spotless. However, he could still smell the faint, metallic scent of the crimson-red liquid. His eyes drifted to the left part of the room, where the smell was the strongest, and he spotted a large freezer next to the wall. A half-smile appeared on the Sannin's face as he followed Naruto's gaze. He slowly walked to the freezer and opened it to reveal hundreds, maybe even 1,000, neatly labeled small vials containing the aforementioned red essence. Blood samples, mostly from Fire Country. They're not that hard to gather. Shinobi have a tendency to bleed a lot. Naruto nodded at the explanation. However, he didn't know exactly why. The hair on the back of his neck had been on high alert ever since he had set foot into the lab, and despite it really looking like a normal hospital lab, it unnerved him like nothing else before. This wasn't good. He had thought the snake would bring him to the place where he was doing his questionable experiments, filled with evidence against him. If he acted now, he would be hunted down as a murderer. We have to find evidence before we can do anything. Act according to the plan, but don't let him do anything too suspicious. It seemed Kurama had come to the same conclusion. Like what? Even the way he breathes is suspicious. Like give you a shot or anything like that, you idiot. You somehow managed to trick my senses. No one has been able to sneak up on me. Naruto presented the question that had been bothering him from the very beginning. An annoyed snort bubbled out from the back of Orochimaru's throat. I'm one of the Sannin, foolish little boy. I could sneak inside a Kage summit and sit down next to your brother or Sarutobi-sensei impersonating one of the leaders and they would have no clue that it was me. Not even my naive, aging teacher would notice it. I've been fooling this whole village for months and you think that tricking you, of all people, is impossible? The snake raised an eyebrow. You are more arrogant than I first thought. The blonde narrowed his eyes into slits, teeth clenched together to restrain himself from simply kicking the Sannins, but now in his annoyance. Indeed, the snake was absolutely right. He acted arrogantly, too overconfident in his own skills. He had been acting like a real idiot. Something he thought he had grown out of over the years. At least most of it. The pale man eyed the teen in front of him, waiting for a reply, but when none came he shrugged and motioned toward the back of the lab. Torikoku-kun, lay down there. Naruto slowly walked toward the metal examining table where Orochimaru pointed, but he leaned against it instead. I will stand, thanks. And no straps or shots. If you want a blood sample I will give it to you by my own hand. Jumpy and paranoid. What do you think I will do to you? Naruto didn't answer, only narrowed his eyes in his suspicion and Orochimaru let it be, as in the end shrugged and handed over a vial to him. Fill at least the half of it with blood. Naruto obeyed, slicing his palm open, letting the crimson liquid flow freely into the vial. His actions were followed by Orochimaru's hungry gaze. It isn't healing as fast as I once saw, the snake remarked, eyeing his still open wound, waiting for an answer that never came. I take it you can control your healing rate. I'm curious. Will your body reject a transplanted organ? Could you grow back a severed limb? Or an eye, for example? So many possibilities. Orochimaru mused, his eyes sparkling with a hungry light. Naruto didn't open his mouth to answer, however the question left him dumbfounded. Could Kurama actually do it? There is a slight chance, but I don't advise you try it. I've never had to do anything like that. Like I would seriously try it. Geez, I was just musing. I also need tissue samples. Naruto raised an eyebrow questioningly, and then glanced down to his still open wound and back to the Sannin, who rolled his eyes. Hair will be fine for now. The Chunin nodded and handed over a small blonde tuft obediently. While the snake turned around with his samples, Naruto's experienced fingers trailed to the bottom of the ice-cold examining table. When he found the right location he stiffened and a slight, almost unnoticeable amount of nature's and his own chakra traveled from his fingertip toward the metal surface, to sketch a miniaturized, ink-black seal on it. A small, easy, but very useful trick he found in one of Jiraiya's old scrolls at Mount Myaboku. It was a small tracing seal which could be sensed only in Sage mode, so when he finally got out of here he would be able to locate it from a safe distance. His eyes widened when the snake suddenly stopped and glanced back over his shoulder with a puzzled expression on his face, then it slipped into an amused smirk. Well, well, well. Messing with nature's energy isn't for kids. It seems there's more to you than I first thought. There goes our plan. Kurama muttered in his mindscape, and a sheepish smile appeared on Naruto's face. The feeling is mutual. The snake grimaced at the oblique offensive words, and put the vial away before turning around to march to the tense teen. His arm moved to grab his cheeks, but Naruto was faster. With one graceful twist he was behind the Sannin with a cocky smile on his face. No touching, snake face. An angry grimace replaced the previous amusement in Orochimaru's expression, and he turned to face the blonde time traveler while folding his arms across his chest. His eyes traveled along Naruto in a new, calculating manner. After one long and tense silent minute, the snake started to chuckle. My. There goes my theory. I thought you were made artificially in a lab to assassinate Minato-kun and that your regeneration ability was a symptom of the mixture of increased body growth and Uzumaki genes. A brainless vessel with inserted memories, skills, and planted orders. And your addiction to peace was only to gain Minato's and my foolhardy teammates' trust. I really thought that your abilities and techniques were just implanted to have the skills to get rid of Minato-kun. But using senjutsu isn't something which can be simply implanted. It requires long years of experience, and not to mention spiritual peace. And I doubt it was Jiraiya who taught it to you. Naruto tilted his head to the side and dismissively folded his arms across his chest, letting out an angry snarl. I'm not some kind of freaky clone or something, Databeo. I'm really Minato's relative. Only your sick and wicked mind would come up with a theory like that. The snake tilted his head to the side, observing the blonde Chunin with increased curiosity. Then what are you? Why would I tell you anything? Naruto's body stiffened to gather nature's energy, but Orochimaru jumped into action before he could finish the process. A snake shot forward from under his sleeve to bite Naruto's neck and to distract him, but a moment later, the snake's head dropped to the ground and disappeared with a puff of smoke as the blonde severed its head with razor-sharp wind chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when the small amount of senjutsu collected this time expanded his senses enough that he could feel the people on the other side of the wall not 10 meters away from where they stood. At least a dozen weak people placed in small groups, maybe cells in the hidden room. What's behind this room? Another set of snakes shoot forward, utilizing the frozen and shocked state of the blonde to clamp down on his arms, neck and torso, restraining him from every small movement, while something also kept him from gathering nature's energy, or use his own chakra. Now I'm pissed off. Naruto let out a snarl and he was about to call for Kurama's chakra when a fling of a tail in his mindscape stopped him. Wait a little bit. Let's see what he wants from us. I'm curious. In the next blink Kurama found himself with a dumbfounded Naruto. Curious? You are curious? The emotionless mask was gone, the blonde's face moved into the perfect mixture or disbelief, anger, and irritation. Let me get this straight. At least 24 snakes are currently biting into my flesh and you are telling me to wait, because you are curious? The fox smirked. Just relax. He is just a small fly. We are way stronger than him if we're using our full power. We need more information before we kick his ass. The blonde growled, but obeyed as Orochimaru's sinister voice stabbed the silence. Well, it seems I have to stop toying with you. It's a shame. I wanted to play with you a little bit more. But once I figure out your healing abilities, you will be a perfect subject for my experiments. Maybe I'll finally be able to transplant a Sharingan into a new body. A sinister smile spread across his face, then he turned around and with one flick of his hand, they disappeared from the room and reappeared in the next one with one quick shunshin. As your eyes ran through the surroundings, noting the cages and bars carved into the hard surface. Then they were locked on the site behind the iron bars. Hospital beds were lined up, each of them holding a captive. A child, a woman or a man under heavy sheets and straps. Everything was silent around them. The people currently occupying the prisons were either too weak or frightened to move, instead they were hiding at the back in the shadows or they were motionless under their sheets. However, one pair of weary eyes flared open for a moment before the small head dropped back from exhaustion. Don't be concerned. It's nothing personal. The Sannin chatted casually and sent a small, almost sincere smile and slowly walked out from the prison, tearing away Naruto's gaze as he was dragged out and they entered a giant cave. Orochimaru dragging his captive all the way to the opposite side, toward another passage. Naruto strained his endurance over his limits, desperately trying to fight against his urge to kick the irritating pale shinobi to the other world. An idea popped up, finally averting his previous thoughts. Minato is going to look for me and find this place eventually. Don't be so sure in that. We are deep inside the Hokage monument. Nobody will hear you, smell you, nor sense your chakra. I could even put a bijou in here and your brother would never even take notice of it. If there wasn't a snake around his neck, Naruto would tilt his head to the side questioningly. Do you think he is bluffing? Kurama shrugged, but a sinister smile spread across his fluffy face in his pleasure. A bijou? Naruto asked curiously. The Sannin chuckled, stopped in the middle of the giant cave and turned to face the young boy, pointing his finger high toward the ceiling. With one movement of his other wrist, the snakes around Naruto's neck moved, forcing his body to move independently from his will, and his head followed Orochimaru's finger. The Chunin's eyes widened. He already saw something similar to this once when he was training with Killer Bee on that creepy island. He hadn't had a clue as to what those were at the time, however he was smarter this time. Well, at least a little. Azure eyes were glued in the pattern, tracing the lines, curves, and symbols. Ancient seals were carved all along the high ceiling. Countless numbers of barriers were layered on top of each other and tied together, creating a thick layer of chakra concealing seals. Orochimaru left the boy lost in his own small world, his amber eyes observing the blonde with a satisfied smile on his face, watching as realization struck the boy. This place is ancient. It was here even before Konoha was founded. No one else even knows about its existence. This place was used to tame one of the bijou in secret. Naruto forced his gaze back to the Sannin as much as the snakes let him, with a wondering expression on his face. A sinister smirk spread across Orochimaru's features, waiting for the blonde to become frightened when he finally realized that this would be the end. But his smile suddenly slipped into a suspicious glare when a wide, foxy, but altogether satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face instead of fear. Then the blonde opened his mouth, and his eyes sparkled with an odd light. Perfect. Minato glanced at his beautiful betrothed with a soft smile on his face, watching as Kushina bit into the food. Even the sauce currently sliding toward her chin from her soft lips looked cute. It didn't mess her perfect image. Kushina ate with closed eyes, but her eyebrows soon started to twitch with irritation. Why are you staring at me? Minato didn't answer, only his smile widened a bit. Kushina sent a suspicious gaze but in the end let it go and glanced up to the clock on the wall and sighed. Toriku's late. I think he went out for ramen with that Iiwa genin. Kushina raised a surprised and confused brow. A genin from Iiwa having ramen with a leaf shinobi? Geez, the world's been turned upside down. Minato let out a loud chuckle and his previous smile widened into a grin in the end. Yeah. Who thought this could ever happen? But nothing is impossible if he is involved. You should have seen it, Kushina. He broke the walls between the nations like it was nothing. Minato snapped his fingers to punctuate his words. Their soft chuckles filled the room for a long minute until it finally died down. Kushina. When the exams are over, let's have the wedding. What do you think? We dwelled long enough as an unofficial pair. Let's make it finally official. Kushina's wide smile was the only answer he needed. The rest of the dinner went smoothly, sharing small, knowing smiles and quick kisses until the last beams of the late winter sun disappeared behind the Hokage monument. Kushina stretched her arm to place a plate back to its place, when she suddenly stiffened, the power disappearing from her body, letting the plate slip out from her graceful fingers, and it reached the hard surface of the floor with a harsh and loud crash as it shattered into a dozen pieces. Minato rushed inside the room, his eyes widening at the scene, watching motionlessly on the edge of panic as Kushina grabbed her stomach and rolled up to ease away something. In the next blink he was next to her, his eyes filled with concern and worry. Kushina! What's the matter? The redhead gritted her teeth and squeezed her eyes shut in concentration as she answered. The fox. Something is wrong with it. It suddenly became restless. The seal is breaking? Is it hurting you? Kushina shook her head. No, it's still intact, it just feels odd. Like the fox is tapping on the inside of my stomach. Let me check it. The girl nodded and Minato gently picked her up and placed her on the couch. Experienced hands trailed above the now free design of the seal on her belly, but just the sight of it made Minato frown in his confusion. It was visible, like Kushina was continuously tapping into the fox's reserves. With a small amount of his own chakra, he let his senses spread inside the design, looking for any abnormality. But he found none. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes into slits, observing the grinning blonde boy surrounded by his summons, paralyzing his chakra reserves and also the ability to gather senjutsu. A small extra addition to their poison he himself developed in case he ever had to deal with Jiraiya. The boy's cocky expression didn't falter, and the snake's face moved into an annoyed grimace. He raised his other arm to finally erase that grin from that impertinent boy's face. But before he could trigger his next move, his summons restraining the boy disappeared in the next blink, shrouding the Chunin inside thick chakra clouds from his wide and surprised eyes. The clouds were in no hurry to dissolve in the motionless air around them. The confident voice of the boy suddenly stabbed the tension as it echoed back and forth from the walls of the giant empty cave. Bringing me here was an unlucky idea. But thanks anyway. The clouds slowly started to fade away. Their puffy surface was gently illuminated with gold, just like the clouds in the rising sun. With a flicker of Naruto's wrist, wind chakra surged from his form, flushing away the last remains of the chakra-enchained mist, and the place around him perfused with golden light. It seems I don't have to hold back. Naruto sent a beaming grin to the frozen Sannin. Orochimaru's amber eyes widened to an unnatural size by his shock, his gaze locked on the golden chakra flames, the crimson-colored eyes and the dilated pupils. In the next moment, he shook off his temporary stasis and narrowed his eyes as he observed his opponent from a new angle. Soon, his sinister smirk was there again. A perfectly trained Jinchuriki. So no new bloodline abilities or something like that. How disillusioning. But which one? The one tail has just been sealed into the Kazekage's youngest son, and you also managed to straighten the seal, based on my network. The 2 and 8 tails are at Kumo for certain. The Mizukage has got the 3 tails in him, while the 4 and 5 tails vessels were still wandering around the nations, but I'm also confident that they are still alive. The 7 tails is participating in this very Chunin exam, while our Minato-kun plays with the 9 tails. The only one I know nothing certain of is the 6 tails. However, I heard the rumors that it belongs to Kiri. Orochimaru trailed off, observing Naruto as if he was some kind of fascinating puzzle which has to be solved. I never thought Kiri scientists would ever reach this advanced level. A result of a brilliant transgenic experiment. If I think about that, they were able to mix Uzumaki DNA in a living body, and as a joke of fate that it is Namikaze's long-lost brother, to create a perfect vessel for the 6 tails. Did you run away from the lab? Naruto grimaced and an irritated snarl bubbled out behind his grown canines. I'm not the result of some kind of fucked-up experiment, you snake freak. And I don't house the 6 tails. You are tapping in the absolute wrong direction. The snake grimaced and shrugged. It doesn't matter. Once I'm finished with you, I'll have enough time to figure out what you are. Naruto narrowed his eyes as one of the snake's arms traveled behind his back and he felt a slight surge of chakra behind the Sannin. He didn't have to think about what he was doing because in the next blink Orochimaru flung into action, and with one jump, he gracefully landed in front of him in an elegant crouch. The pale man twisted his body to slam his open hand into his stomach. The tips of his fingers already shined with purple chakra, to seal away his tenant's power and make him unable to use any kind of chakra properly for a long time. Gojo Fuin! 5 elements seal. The attack was quick, it was sudden, but Naruto's composure didn't falter. The seal was only centimeters from his stomach when a golden chakra arm surged from his torso, grabbing the Sannin's wrist and elegantly throwing him to the other side of the cave. By the impact of his pale body, the hard surface cracked and debris surged inside the cave. The echoing noise of landing debris filled the cavern almost immediately. With one more elegant movement of Naruto's wrist, a surge of wind cleared the debris and the smoke, revealing an angrily snarling Sannin. I won't let you do that this time. The snake rolled his head side to side to get rid of his irritation and slowly straightened himself to casually throw his long black hair behind his back, out from his sight, and narrowed his amber eyes. What do you mean by this time? Naruto received a mental slap from his fluffy tenant and a sheepish, embarrassed grin spread across his face. Nothing. With one last cocky grin, the blonde Chunin flung into action to pin the Sannin in an enormous taijutsu battle. Naruto sent a chakra-enchained fist toward the frowning pale man, who avoided the attack with one elegant twist. An annoyed growl left his lips, a chakra arm emerged from his back, to catch up with the pale man's fluid deflections. Their style was the perfect match of each other. While Orochimaru's movements screamed perfection and precision gained by practicing every single kata until they were flawless, Naruto's movements were the perfect opposite. There were only small flashes of 1 or 2 perfect stances, most of his movements were made by pure instinct. While Orochimaru was the perfect, calm ocean in his movements, Naruto was the maelstrom he was named after. He was wild, unstoppable and unpredictable, leaving behind debris and destruction where he put a hand or foot. Be it the Sannin's body or simply the floor he touched. While the snake used perfect stances to avoid an attack, Naruto simply tried to break through his defense with brute power, not caring about his own openings. I want to have a piece of him also. Naruto snorted and a clone popped into existence in the next moment, his features already moving something more animalistic until a wide and sinister smirk appeared on his face. He is all yours, furball. Kurama had sent an annoyed glare in reply, before his attention snapped back to the heavily breathing pale man. Orochimaru the Snake Sannin. I longed for this moment for a long time. I'll have a sweet time killing you slowly. Naruto grimaced and stepped to the side to slip away from another attack of the Sannin, who almost immediately split his attention between the two opponents. The Bijou, I assume? His only answer was a widening smirk. Kurama immediately flung into action, the clone's nails extended into razor-sharp claws, and he dashed toward the snake, who jumped back to avoid the insanely fast attack. Golden chakra clouds started to bubble around the clone, and Naruto decided that it would be best for him if he simply stepped to the side and let Kurama blow some steam which had been accumulating since they had arrived in the past. The golden chakra slowly faded away to give place to the slowly gathering nature's energy. He watched as three tails came to life behind his clone, currently controlled by Kurama. The smirk moved into a dangerous and satisfied grimace as power surged through Kurama's borrowed body. Claws slashed toward the Sannin with increased speed, inking thin, crimson-red lines on pale skin, tearing away pieces of cloth. A defensively raised kunai shattered in two after one slash. Another tail came to life between two attacks. The once animalistic clone of Naruto slowly disappeared and was replaced by a miniature version of Kurama. It was odd. The battle and the fox's movements were animalistic. They were primitive and barbaric. Each of his attacks screamed power and brute force. But somehow behind the rough surface it was still royal in an ancient way. Behind the beastly movements Naruto could also see graceful and fluid motions of a perfectly composed fast waltz. It was fascinating seeing Kurama's and Orochimaru's enormous battle. It was fast, it was simple. And it was deadly. There was no time for flashy jutsu between the lightning-fast strikes. It was sheer taijutsu. And the clone was still there, untouched, while the Sannin bled from countless small cuts and bruises. Naruto decided that Kurama had played long enough. He almost felt bored. However, before he could make a step further into the fight, something made him freeze in place and his eyes to widen. The golden chakra around Kurama slowly became orange with a red tint as two more tails came into existence. His expression became more and more furious than before. Slowly, the consciousness started to fade away from his friend's eyes as anger and fury took over its place. The chakra that once emitted life and warmth in the last year now felt menacing and evil like in the old times. An angry growl echoed in his own mindscape, and a tug from his stomach kicked him out from his frozen state. It was Kurama in his own self. He was struggled against his own instincts. A hint of long-felt animalistic anger flushed through Naruto's own mind from the ancient old Bijou, sending chills down his back. Naruto, something is wrong! Dismiss that damn clone or he'll go nuts! Naruto nodded and raised his hands to make the necessary seal, and the clone popped out from existence with one last furious glance toward his original. What the hell? Naruto growled to himself. Don't use my full power until we figure out what the hell happened. Only in sage mode. The blonde nodded in agreement, already gathering nature's energy. Nothing could be heard beside Orochimaru's harsh breathing. The snake, utilizing the opening, ran through a long chain of hand signs between two breaths. Chakra smoke filled the cave, shrouding the bastard from blue eyes, but Naruto could still sense the drastically increased smell of reptile. An annoyed grimace appeared on his face, when the dismissing smoke slowly started to reveal the scaled skin of a giant summon. I have to admit you caught me off guard, Toriko-kun. I never thought anyone would be that bold, letting the Bijou gain control over a clone. Even Uzumaki Kushina isn't as much of an idiot to do something as reckless as that. A deep growl bubbled out from the back of Naruto's throat as his mother's name slipped from Orochimaru's mouth. But before he could retort, the snake flung into action. The giant serpent rushed forward with insane speed, forcing Naruto to jump from out of its way. It wasn't just any of his summons. It was Manda. The biggest, strongest, and the fastest. Naruto, biting on his thumb, smearing blood, ran through the hand signs of the summoning technique and slammed his palm onto the ground, only to receive a mental slap from his never-missing fluffy companion when nothing happened. Idiot. Naruto scratched his head sheepishly. His movements were followed by Orochimaru's narrowed and suspicious eyes. Yeah, it just slipped out from my mind, stupid time thingy. Naruto whispered into the air. Don't talk aloud! Naruto winced as Kurama barked out with a harsh voice. Now he was really missing his summoning contract so much he couldn't even describe it. Before he could continue his line of thought, Orochimaru got tired of his inner discussion with the Bijou and sent a giant fireball toward the blonde teen, who easily jumped out from its way with an annoyed grimace on his face. Hey! Don't interrupt my discussion, you snake freak! Orochimaru narrowed his eyes on the top of Manda's head and flung into action one more time, not even bothering to retort. Debris flew across the cage as the summon's enormous body made connection with the surface where Naruto stood a moment before. The named blonde snorted and jumped up to join Orochimaru on his summon's head. The Chunin gracefully landed in a crouch. His azure eyes traveled up to the annoyed Sannin and jumped into action. He aimed a hit toward Orochimaru's spine, but he easily avoided his attack. Naruto grimaced when his next kick was also easily deflected, and that was the point when he felt as the Sannin was also surrounded by nature's energy. It wasn't as defined as him, nor as Kabuto's back then, but it was there. He infused his senses with its help to deflect his attacks. It's time to move to some frog kumite, don't you think, Kurama? He grinned when his companion made an agreeing nod in his mindscape. He suddenly changed stance, his hand shot toward the widening eyes of the Sannin, who wasn't able to dodge. At least not the extended senjutsu. Nor his next punch and the series of kicks he sent immediately after the first one. It was somehow fascinating to see Orochimaru's struggle in his hands. He made up his mind suddenly and jumped down from Manda's head. 2 clones popped into existence. The sound of the Rasen Shuriken filled everything around them almost immediately as they formed it in no time. The Sannin's eyes widened when the spinning ball of pure energy rushed toward him and his summon, not leaving any time to deflect. Millions of invisible razor-sharp chakra blades rushed toward Naruto's opponent with unstoppable speed. A second later, everything was shrouded by blinding white light as the technique exploded, eating away Orochimaru's form, together with Manda's. The cave was dead silent as the technique's squealing sound finally died down, but the enormous amount of chakra-filled smoke left by the giant summon still lingered in the motionless air. A wide and satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face when the smoke finally cleared and revealed a giant crater in the middle of it, where Orochimaru once stood. But before he could become cocky, a familiar and creepy chuckle bubbled out from the crater. The bloody form of Orochimaru slowly raised, the debris creaked under his foot, stabbing the offensive silence with his every footstep. Did you really think that a boy like you could finish me off that easily? Me, the greatest of the Sannin? Naruto cocked his head to the side, hissing his answer behind his gritted teeth. Yeah. I did. Bastard. But I have to admit, you continuously caught me off guard. You are unpredictable. If Manda didn't shield me, I would be nothing more than a corpse. He flung his black hair behind his shoulders, out from his sight with a casual wave of his hand. It's a mistake I won't make once more. Orochimaru smirked. We will see. Naruto answered with a casual tone, and with a straight face, something he had picked up from his father, which always managed to push opponents over the edge. And it seems, by Orochimaru's suddenly angry grimace, he wasn't an exception. His expression slowly smoothened as the previous anger evaporated. Orochimaru smirked before he opened his mouth. I still got some ace up in my sleeve, my child. In the next blink, the Sannin's hand blurred by the insanely fast pace at which he was forming hand signs. And despite the fact that Naruto didn't hesitate even a second and rushed toward his opponent, this time he couldn't keep up with the speed. Yamada no Jutsu! 8-headed serpent jutsu! He had to jump backward as Orochimaru finished preparing his technique, his form disappearing once again inside the white smoke which followed his jutsu. With a sudden rush from his palm, the smoke immediately cleared to reveal a giant white, dragon-like thingy? Naruto's eyes widened. A giant, pure white serpent-like thing stood where Orochimaru once was, its scaled skin containing a countless number of spikes. He grimaced as he counted its heads. All of its 8 heads held razor-sharp fangs bigger than himself, and he could only compare their size to Kurama's own fangs. They were maybe even bigger. You know, Kurama, you said not to use our joint power, but I think we should put that agreement aside. He let out a relieved sigh when he felt Kurama's nod. They had to be careful. Whatever happened to the clone, it could happen to them also. Hopefully the fact that they were their originals and not a clone could prevent it. The giant cave fortunately held enough space for their fight as long as he didn't use a bijou bomb. He winced at the thought of what would happen if he accidentally shot a hole through the Hokage monument from the inside. He pushed those thoughts from his head and let the golden flames encompass his body once again as he dropped the last remains of nature's energy. But this time they didn't stop at the edge of his skin, it moved further and further until Kurama's complete form appeared from it, Naruto staying still on the top of his head. The enormous 8-headed serpent flung into action almost immediately, claws and fangs tore into flesh and pure energy. Cuts and bruises appeared on Naruto's body by the enormous strength of the dragon god's attacks. Countless numbers of razor-sharp needles rushed toward his form from one of the heads, while the others threw Raiton, Futon and one Katon attack. He was barely able to dodge the Kuzunagi's blade rushing from one of the heads to stab through his heart, but it still gashed a long and deep cut on his side. Anger overwhelmed and blurred his senses just like before. Like the poise suddenly tilted to the wrong side. It was just like before the start of the war. Just like Kurama's old and tainted chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when realization hit him harder than one of Sakura's chakra-boosted punches. Kurama! I know what's happening to us. It's the other you. You told me that you had lost half of your chakra when you fought with Dad. Your other self-seeing chakra is overwhelming us. His anger and his hatred is what we are feeling. They are somehow leaking toward us through Mom's seals and all those barriers. The giant form of Kurama suddenly froze between two attacks and glanced toward his companion and nodded in understanding. We have to finish this off as quickly as we can. Get serious and don't play around. Deal. Format 22. Naruto nodded and jumped to the head of Kurama again as soon as the bijou locked his opponent under him, pinning down his every head with one chakra arm for each. 8 clones popped into existence, rushing together with the original toward the pinned giant heads of the white serpent, carefully concentrated inky black balls already forming above their heads. In the next blink, the cave was once again shrouded in smoke and debris as the 9 small bijou dama connected with flesh, and at once the summon disappeared. Kurama's chakra slowly faded away from existence together with his disturbing rage, back to the original, but this time Naruto didn't let his guard down. He patiently waited for the smoke to finally clear before he reached for nature's energy, and finally spotted what he was looking for. Another clone popped into existence, and the 2 blondes slowly approached the bloody and harshly breathing man laying motionlessly on the floor aside from his chest's fast, fluttering movement. Orochimaru was finally able to turn his head toward the sound of the footsteps for a second before his head dropped back to the ground. A wet but still menacing chuckle bubbled out from his mouth together with some blood, staining the ground under him more. A bijou with 9 tails and in the form of a fox, frog, kumite, and senjutsu training from Mount Maiboku, a fully developed Rasengan. You gave me so many new pieces for this fine puzzle. Orochimaru's voice was raspy, and Naruto could feel as he strained to not let it falter in the slightest by the pain. However, he didn't answer, he just stood there with his clone, watching the beaten, once proud Sannin. His injuries weren't life-threatening. At least, if he could get medical attention very soon, but he was obviously unable to move even his finger. Kushina's and that Namikaze brat's DNA. Your resemblance even to her, which everyone just overlooked and tossed to the side. Your sudden appearance involving a Sharingan and space-time ninjutsu. The Sannin closed his mouth, his eyes becoming foggy for a second, before he slowly opened his mouth again. Space and time. Time. Orochimaru murmured into the air, but his eyes flared suddenly with a greedy light. He slowly turned his head to glance up again. Only one question slipped from his lips. How? The blonde hesitated for a moment before he answered with a low tone, but his voice was still sounded somehow relieved. I don't know, I fought with that bastard Uchiha. I wanted to seal him away, and the next thing I know I wake up here and now in the hospital. Naruto shook his head. It doesn't matter now. The bastard already figured it out, and somehow he couldn't surpass the urge to finally talk about it with someone. To confess. Even if it had to be Orochimaru. Do you want to go back? I can help you. Put this all to the side and I'll help you. Naruto quickly averted his gaze, his hands clenched into fists, his azure blue eyes flashed with crimson red by his sudden anger. You will do terrible things in the future. I won't let you go. I can't let you go. I can help you to dash. Naruto snapped his head back to the Sannin and spat out his words as if it was sour poison interrupting the injured man. You killed and experimented on countless men and women. Even innocent children. On Yamato Taicho. You killed Sandai Mejiji. You tried to kill Jiraiya and Tsunade, me from time to time. It's because of you Sasuke defected. You pushed Kabuto to insanity, and if it wasn't for him and your damned Edo Tensei, we could have ended the 4th Shinobi War. If it wasn't for you and your damned technique, Madara would never have been resurrected. A satisfied smirk appeared on the Sannin's blood-stained face. So it was Madara. So that old geezer finally managed to die. Anger and fury overwhelmed Naruto's mind once again, but it was his clone who grabbed the Sannin and shook him. So you know he isn't dead? You know where he's hiding? Tell me. I've still got time before he brainwashes Obito. Orochimaru cocked his head to the side. Obito? You mean the dead last in Minato's team? Kukuku, oh the irony. Orochimaru's eyes suddenly widened and glanced toward the original. Tell me, did I reach my goal? Did I become immortal? Did I learn every jutsu in the world? Naruto's anger had risen to a new level, but it was once again his clone who shook the Sannin violently instead of his own self. Where is he? Orochimaru's eyes slowly moved to the clone and he smirked. If I get my answer, you will also get yours. And in equivalent exchange. The Sannin's voice finally faltered as he gasped for air and a painful grimace flashed through his face. Tell me what I want to know and I will tell you what I can know about Madara. Naruto clenched his teeth and the clone dropped the Sannin to the ground. You will at least partially reach your goal. As far as I know, you had been able to transfer your consciousness into a new vessel. into a new body. A wicked and almost insane smirk spread across Orochimaru's face, his expression turned into the mirror of utter ecstasy, and he started to laugh almost hysterically. Naruto waited impatiently until the laughter finally stopped by bloody coughing. I told you what you wanted to know. Now it's your turn. Where is Madara's hideout this time? The Sannin smirked and spat out some crimson liquid. Who said that I know where he is? I just knew that he wasn't dead. I found Hashirama's diary. I know he left his body there. He never had the courage to check the body. And I know his body disappeared. I just connected the dots. Naive little Torikakun. Naruto gritted his teeth and turned on his heels to walk away, but the Sannin's raspy voice stopped him. What are you going to do now? I'm leaving. Aren't you going to kill me? I know your little secret. Naruto closed his eyes and answered without turning around. No one is going to believe you. You are a traitor. You are insane and obsessed with power. You will live. You will live a long life in a prison where you can think about your sins. And maybe one day, you will realize what you have done and you will turn away from the darkness. Gigi and Jiraiya never give up on you, so I also won't. A shiver ran down Naruto's spine when he heard the snake's almost crazy chuckle. Cuckoo, I'm going to escape. No one is able to hold me back. I'm the strongest of the Sannins. I'm going to be immortal. I can reach my goal. Yet, a 17-year-old boy was able to kick your ass just now, while my teammate killed you in the future. When he was 16, you were pathetic. An angry growl filled the empty cave, soon followed by Orochimaru's hysterical voice with a hint of panic. You told me I was able to move between bodies. I was immortal. Naruto finally glanced over his shoulder. Immortal? Maybe. But not invulnerable. With this one last sentence, he slowly continued his walk toward the exit. Orochimaru's angry voice followed him the whole way. He was about to reach the entrance of the passage leading toward the cells to check up on the prisoners, when the Sannin's displeased shouting suddenly stopped after a loud snap. It was unnaturally loud in the silent cave as it echoed back and forth between the cliffs, reaching his sensitive ears countless times, making his hair stand almost painfully on end. He recognized that sound. But he almost felt too frightened to turn back, knowing what he would find. With the last remains of nature's energy still in him, he sensed Orochimaru's chakra slowly leave his body. But it didn't disappear. Somehow it changed and morphed until it became one with the nature's. In the end, Naruto braced himself and slowly turned around. His clone's natural features were nowhere to be seen. Crimson-red dilated eyes and thickened whiskers greeted him, together with the limp body of the once fearsome and proud Sannin. Amber-colored eyes stared into the emptiness in disbelief. Kurama's stolen hands were still hovering over Orochimaru's broken neck. What have you done? Naruto whispered with wide eyes. What both of us know was necessary. You just didn't have the stomach to do so. Kurama answered back in a low tone, eyeing as Naruto hesitantly took one step toward the already cooling body of the Sannin. But he stopped. He had already seen enough dead bodies. He didn't want to see one more. Even if it was Orochimaru. He let him live. He wanted him to live. He didn't want him to die. He just wanted to stop him, to lock him up forever in a dark cell. Kurama let out a sigh, and with one flicker of his borrowed hand, Orochimaru's body was covered with burning red flames, tearing into the dead flash, inferno burning away all the evidence. Naruto's hands squeezed into fists and suddenly he turned and rushed toward his original goal to check on the prisoners when the smell of the burning body reached his nose. But he faltered in the middle of the passage and dropped to his knees when his clone disappeared and his memories returned. His stomach turned upside down, as the memory of the popping sound kept echoing inside his head. His clone's desperate struggle to get control when he realized what Kurama was about to do. The disgusting feeling between his fingers as the vertebra slipped to the side when it couldn't endure the force anymore, and the snapping sound again as it echoed thousands of times inside the empty cave, while Orochimaru's empty and foggy eyes stared back at him with surprise and disbelief. He couldn't fight off the urge. He emptied his stomach where he was, only able to stumble some hesitant steps away from the mess when he dropped to the ground once again and gratefully embraced the offered unconsciousness of his exhausted body to flee from the memories of his first kill. Minato paced back and forth in the living room, impatiently waiting for Jiraiya to finally step out of the room currently housing Kushina. He didn't know what could have happened to the seal and he rushed for Jiraiya as soon as he realized it. But that perverted bastard ordered him to leave, insisting that he was disturbing him in his work. Finally Jiraiya stepped out from the room and the worried Hokage turned on his heels immediately, but his sensei's raised hand stopped him from bursting out his questions. Kushina and the seal are okay. I've put another layer of surpassing seal over the existing ones and it closed the fox's chakra flow completely. She is sleeping now. It won't bother her anytime soon. Minato let out a relieved sigh and dropped onto the couch, rubbing his eyes. What happened to the seal? Technically, it is in perfect condition. Jiraiya sent a knowing smile to Minato and winked. Nothing serious. Just some natural reaction with female Jinchuriki. She will tell you soon. Tell me what? Kushina has gained some weight, don't you think? Minato snorted furiously once again and stood up angrily. What are you talking about? Don't beat around the bush. And she is as beautiful as ever. But a hint of a blush betrayed the lie, making the Sannin grin knowingly again. The Hokage eyed the aging pervert for a second before he let out a defeated sigh. Okay. Maybe she gained just a little on her tummy. But if she caught even a hint of what I've told you, she would kill me. Jiraiya let out a low chuckle and shook his head. Oh, believe me, my friend. She won't bite off your head because of it. At least not now. Not until it becomes uncomfortable for her. You know, aqueous ankles, no sleeping on her stomach for months and so on. But you know, she'll get much bigger breasts for your pleasure, so it'll be worth it. Minato's confusion only grew bigger and bigger, so did Jiraiya's smug grin. What the hell are you hinting at, old pervert? A grimace appeared on the toad's face. Geez. People around you tend to forget how you were sometimes, back before you become a hero. Everybody talks about you the same way, a prodigy, a rare genius that appears only once in a generation. Jiraiya trailed off for a second, before he shouted out. But I remember. For a genius you could be really dense occasionally when it wasn't about ninja stuff. For example with the ladies. It's good you've outgrown most of it. I remember when you were just a genin. You used to be as dense as a dead stone, until you reached puberty. If it's not about a jutsu or something. I hope it's nothing genetic. Kushina used to be the same. It could become prominent in your child. Minato raised an eyebrow, his azure blue eyes still observing his teacher suspiciously. And why would you be concerned about that suddenly? Jiraiya let out a sigh and shook his head, mumbling something incoherent under his nose. In the end, Minato just waved a hand and dropped himself on the couch again, realizing he would have to interrogate Jiraiya later to get some real answers out of him. Then he glanced up to the clock to note the very late hour. Where the hell is my brother? Jiraiya snorted. I assume causing trouble, as always. I overheard him inviting the Iwa genin from yesterday for ramen if he was able to get into the next round. They still must be at Ichiraku, but... Minato trailed off. Yeah, Ichiraku closes at 10. It's already almost midnight. He won't stay open this late even for your ramen-addicted brother. He must be sitting on your stupid stone head again, musing or philosophizing or whatever he's always doing up there. Minato nodded and tilted his head side to side until he heard the satisfying popping sound as one of his joints slipped back to its proper place. Why don't you just go and pick him up with your Horatian? The seal is still on his back, isn't it? Minato thought about it for a moment and nodded once more. Right. Will you stay here until we get back? I don't want to leave Kushina alone in her state right now. Jiraiya snorted. Oh, don't be afraid. She's got companions. Minato tilted his head again in confusion and let out a sigh, seeing that he won't be able to squeeze out any straight answer from his teacher tonight. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out for his brother's seal and chakra signature. Jiraiya watched him curiously as, instead of disappearing immediately, a frown appeared on his features in his concentration. What? You can't even find a teenage boy's chakra? Jiraiya was about to send another jab, when Minato shook his head and answered, his eyes scrunching as he concentrated even more. But his brow moved into one coherent line. It doesn't feel normal. I can barely sense my marker, and it is somewhere under the Hokage monument. What? Jiraiya snapped and stood up immediately. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I just said. I'm barely able to locate his seal. Like he's under a barrier, buried deep inside the mountain. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. A Doton Jutsu? Minato shook his head. No. I saw him trying to use Doton. He really tried. And he was frustrated beyond words when he couldn't pull it out. His chakra is flowing through my seal like, it feels like he's sleeping or he's unconscious. The Iwa team? Minato's frown deepened as he reached for his other markers. No. 3 of my best Anbu are watching over them after that incident. All of my markers on the Iwa members are in their accommodation, sleeping peacefully. Couldn't you just simply teleport to where he is? Jiraiya's voice was filled with concern now. I've been trying to do so from the beginning, but the seal is weak beyond words. Minato stopped for a second. I got it! With this last yell, the toad Sannin found himself alone in the living room. Only Kushina's soft snoring leaked inside the empty room. Jiraiya glanced toward the closed door and sighed, softly murmuring into the air around him. I really hope, Kushina, that the baby in your womb won't cause this much trouble, or Minato is going to be a white-haired man the time he hits 30. Minato stumbled into hard rock when he reappeared in the empty passage, meters from his proposed destination thanks to the faint marker. His head connected with the raw surface with a loud bang in the empty and silent passage. The blonde had been desperately trying to force the dancing stars out from his sight, and he was about to shake his head, but he froze in mid-movement as a harsh smell reached his nose. The stink of death, of burnt bodies all around him, and the smell of his brother's blood. He slowly glanced down where he could sense Toriku, and he gasped as he spotted his brother's form lying motionlessly on the floor, his clothes bloody and torn. He rushed toward his brother and slowly turned him over, and he had to restrain another gasp when the stench of someone else's blood flickered through his nose. He immediately made a quick checkup on his relative and let out a relieved sigh. Nothing serious, some wounds and a slash on his side, but it had already half healed. He had passed out because of shock based on the pattern of his chakra flow. Something new hit his nose from his brother's clothes, the smell of reptiles. The sore smell of snakes. Orochimaru. Azure blue eyes immediately started to map his surroundings, finding several weak chakra signatures not far away from him, but the Sannin was nowhere to be seen or sensed. The thick and disgusting stink of burnt flesh invaded his nose from the other side. He ran to the entrance where the thick stench was coming from, his eyes widened by the enormous empty cave inside the Hokage monument. His eyes ran through the countless number of barrier seals all around the hard surface, noting the signs of an enormous battle and also the charred remains of a body at the other side of it, near an immense crater. The body which, beside the burned flesh, still reeked of snakes. It was Orochimaru. Confusion ran across him, but instead of burying himself in his troubled thoughts, experience kicked itself in line. He made his way back to his brother, but he didn't stop. He took aim at the end of the passage when he heard a groan from there. This time, he couldn't suppress his shocked gasp as the air rushed into his lungs with insane speed by the sight. Dozens of cells were lined on each side of the cave, a quarter of it holding faint, very weak and slowly fading chakra signatures. Most of the people were on the verge of death, and only a small push would be enough for them to pass the line. Everything smelled like Orochimaru. It was his place. It was his doings. Minato hurried toward the nearest cell, and after a quick survey of its interior, he immediately made an opening between the bars, enough for him to slip inside, toward the small, slumped body laying motionlessly in a dark corner. A child, based on his size not more than 10. The captive didn't react to his presence in even the slightest way, only the weak, rhythmical movement of his chest hinted that the child was indeed alive. Minato made his decision in the next blink. He didn't know what the hell was going on here, but there was no way he would wait for even one more second to get help. He needed Toriku's marker here, and he was stable, just unconscious. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes in the next second, he reappeared next to his teacher, who opened his mouth to ask what the hell was going on. But Jiraiya didn't have time to speak. Minato's commanding voice filled the room immediately. Anbu! 4 masked and cloaked men appeared beside him in the next blink. Cat, you stay here! Watch over Kushina! Before the soldier could even nod, Minato grabbed Jiraiya and the other 3 stunned shinobi and disappeared from the room. Jiraiya opened his eyes and turned his head when 2 of the elites slumped to the floor by the aftereffects of the Hiraishin. Minato's commanding voice kicked the wobbly standing Anbu out from his shock, immediately straightening himself. There are cells with captives all across this passage. I'll go grab any available medics and be back in a minute. Go check on them and get rid of the bars. The 2 Anbu will be okay in a minute. Toriku is also here, stable, but there is also corpse in there. Jiraiya moved his head where Minato pointed. His eyes widened when he finally recognized his friend's scent under the heavy smell of burned flesh. The unmistakable smell of a serpent. The 2 Anbu gathered themselves surprisingly fast and disappeared with the 3rd at the other side of the passage to obey their leader's order. Jiraiya, it's him. It's Orochimaru's place. Stay professional, please. I need you here, calm and collected. The Sannin only distantly felt as he nodded. His eyes were still locked on the small entrance where Minato pointed, not really noticing as his student disappeared. A low moan disturbed his frozen state. The faint sound of ruffling clothes and sudden coughing and spitting interrupted his troubled thoughts. He glanced down to the slowly waking Toriku, who suddenly stiffened, his eyes flung open and widened as memories overwhelmed him again. Blue eyes stared into the nothingness unfocused for long seconds until Jiraiya slowly walked closer and leaned over him. Naruto immediately jumped onto his feet when Jiraiya touched his shoulder, not concerned with the already healing slash on his side. He backed off until his back hit a hard surface, only to a second later slid down slowly, his eyes staring unblinkingly to his own hands. His breathing was harsh by the sudden surge of adrenaline, and an unconscious gag escaped his sore mouth. Jiraiya reached for him once more to shake him out from his state of shock and get some answers he was eager to know, grabbing his shoulders and turned him to be face to face. But the azure blue eyes didn't connect with his own, they were staring somewhere behind him. Jiraiya shook the blonde once again, and this time the light of consciousness reappeared in the blue eyes. What happened? The named blonde glanced down to his own hands once again, and for a second Jiraiya thought he wouldn't be able to shake him out from his state once more. But his faint whisper washed out his concern about his sanity. Orochimaru, he brought me here after the premises. He blackmailed me to come with him. He wanted to experiment on me because I heal fast. Then he made up his mind and got me with his snakes. Naruto's hand traveled toward his neck. Despite his healing ability, 2 small and red bite marks were still visible on his neck, together with several more on his arms peeking out under his torn clothes. Then we fought. His whisper slowly died down, and Jiraiya squeezed his shoulder to gain his attention. It was successful. Azure blue eyes snapped up, to staring to Jiraiya's own. And then what? What happened? Naruto's eyes slipped to the side in shame. And then I killed him, I killed him. His eyes widened when he realized once again as it slipped out from his mouth. His stomach turned upside down again as the memories started to push themselves into his thoughts again, and another gag escaped behind his gritted teeth. But this time, he fortunately suppressed the urge. Stay focused! Azure eyes snapped up in alert by the commanding voice, shaking him up again. His breathing steadied and his heartbeat decreased to a normal level, then his eyes widened when he finally realized something very important. There are people down here! He had experimented on them. They need help. Naruto pushed Jiraiya out of his way and jumped to his feet to stumble 2 or 3 steps before he leaned against the wall to get some support. The world dangerously tilted as blood rushed inside his head by the sudden movement. A new thought popped up in his head, immediately sweeping his dizziness to the side. This gave him a new power to lock away his previous shock and his weariness. With a huge chakra wave he mapped out his surroundings and found what he was looking for. Immediately, he rushed to the deeper part of the caves where the cells were, rushing past 2 stunned Anbu with Jiraiya in his heels, heading toward the last cell, ripping the bars out from their place and dropping himself next to a small body. Naruto gently brushed out the spiky brown hair that stuck to the child's face, and let out a relieved sigh when he noted the steady heartbeat and breathing of his once team leader. Another sigh of relief escaped behind his lips as the child's eyes slowly opened to stare up at him with a blank expression. Then the ink-black eyes suddenly cleared when he noted the stranger with a bright smile above him. You managed to escape. Is it over? He won't come back? Yamato whispered in disbelief. Naruto nodded before he whispered back. It's over. He won't come back. The child's eyes slowly became foggy again, but this time because they restrained tears, however it was a lost cause. Just when his lips turned up into a bright and relieved smile, tears started to flow over his sunken cheeks. It was that moment medics infested the place, gently pushing Naruto out of their way, and it was then when he felt Minato's gentle hands squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. He glanced up to his father who sent him a small, comforting smile, giving a helping hand to him, so he could retreat to the background, where a medic already waited for him to treat his own wounds. But he refused it. They would heal in hours anyway, and the others needed every available help more than him. He just stood there with his father's hand still on his shoulder, silently watching as the medics were working on Yamato and the others. But when an Anbu stepped next to them, he could unwillingly overheard his report, making his body stiffen. Someone already informed the council, Hokage-sama. They want an immediate meeting, and someone from the council is charging Namikaze Toriku with treason and murdering Orochimaru of the Sanins anonymously. The Anbu made a hesitant side glance behind his mask before he continued with an even lower tone, if it is possible. Hokage-sama, the punishment for treason is dash. The Anbu who had been the blonde boy's shadow for long months has suddenly became silent, losing his will to finish the sentence. But it wasn't the Anbu nor the Hokage who spoke out loud what had been left hanging in the air, 2 words that none of them dared to voice out loud. It was Naruto who murmured into the thick air. Death sentence. The blonde time traveler slowly moved his strangely emotionless and hard azure eyes up to his father, forcing his tense muscles to obey. But when a gentle hand squeezed his shoulder once again, his muscles immediately started to relax. Another arm wrapped around his other shoulder, reassuringly holding him tighter to his side like a soft pillow to lull away his fear, and Minato softly murmured into his ears, loosening the last remains of his tension. Everything will be all right. I promise. And Naruto believed every word instantly. Chapter 21, 2 Foxes, a Crow and a Hawk. It had been 6 hours by the time the last of the medics left the caves together with the last remaining survivor of Orochimaru's hidden activity, and another 6 more since the meeting had been started. The council was silent, despite everyone's shock, storms of indignation, disbelief, denial, and even utter confusion. All of the members were dragged out from their beds, requesting their immediate presence. None of the clan leaders knew any details about what had exactly happened. Just the fact that someone had killed the legendary Sannin. Most likely the one who had anonymously charged the blonde time traveler was desperate enough to pull out this tantrum, without full knowledge of the situation. Jiraiya locked his feelings behind a wall and he struggled between his own emotions, trying to deal with the loss and betrayal of his friend, and shifting between feelings of anger against his murderer and fear for Toriku's life. But Naruto wouldn't be fooled by his teacher's calm shell. He knew perfectly well Orochimaru was one of Jiraiya's best friends. He was one of his precious people, and he killed him. It was him who killed him. Guilt rose inside his chest from time to time as he also snuck peeks at his godfather when he wouldn't notice. Soon, the court wasn't about him, his treason, or his murder. It was about Orochimaru, and what he had done. At the beginning of the sudden trial, most members sent warning glances toward him. Even Inoichi eyed him more carefully than ever. Only the Nara clan head and Uchiha Fugaku watched him with calm, but still calculating eyes. Sharingan flared into life from time to time. Even Kurama was dead silent, observing the situation without a word. Naruto finished his report an hour ago, carefully leaving out some of the sensitive things. Like how Orochimaru had blackmailed him, and exactly how he was able to win a battle against one of the Sannins. It was surprisingly easy even for him. He didn't have to face Jiraiya or Minato. It was Danzo who asked the questions, trying to twist everyone against him. Lying into the face of that bastard was miles easier than lying to his parent and godfather. The false words slipped from his lips so easily that even he was afraid of himself for a blink before he pushed the thought away. He was adamant that it was the old war hawk who informed the council. It was a desperate and rash decision from Danzo. Even if he don't know much about the man, he was perfectly sure that behind his calm and emotionless shell, he was screaming inside his head because of his own stupid and desperate step. But Naruto felt that he was missing something very important. Naruto just half listened as a shinobi was listing the already processed evidence against the once cheered Sannin. The uncountable number of corpses they had found in another place in the middle of Konoha had been discovered thanks to the only survivor's statement. Somehow the small boy, Tenzo, was able to provide some important details pointing out the lab's whereabouts when Orochimaru moved him to his new accommodation. It was buried deep underground, in the middle of the ancient sewers of the oldest part of the town, hidden by several layers of seals tidily copied from the cave Naruto and Orochimaru had been fighting in. All over the place, bodies were strung up along the walls on wooden platforms, or lying around in the room ready for later use and investigation. Naruto was glad Orochimaru dragged him to this cave and not to that place. He would definitely have gone berserk in the tunnels if he had to witness that sight. It was hard enough to see people behind bars, but seeing the corpses of innocent children, Naruto shook his head and glanced toward the small podium in the middle of the council chamber. The shinobi continued listing evidence. They counted almost 100 grown men and women, and 55 corpses of children altogether in the 2 hidden laboratories. They had found masses upon masses of notes, books and scrolls filled with information and complete descriptions of his experiments. When the man finally finished his report, a medic stepped to the center of the council room to read out her own. Her voice faltered from time to time as she couldn't surpass some of her surfacing emotions. From the dozen survivors they had found in the chambers, only one child's condition was stable. Furthermore, he was conscious and already questioned. The interrogator also verified what the evidence was so clearly screaming. It was Orochimaru's secret laboratory. The other survivors weren't as lucky. They had already lost 4 of the children in the last 6 hours, and nothing gave the impression the adults would make it through the night. Silence fell when the medic finished her report and slowly moved to the background. It was now the lead interrogator's turn to step on the small podium. The child and the medic reports verify Namikaze Toriku's claims that Orochimaru restrained him with his snake summons and he was dragged until they reached the main chamber. From that point, there is no witness who can verify Toriko-san's words that he managed to free himself and kill Orochimaru of the Sannin by himself with a lucky fire jutsu. Paper ruffled as Makoto checked his notes. Toriko-san claimed that he had hit Orochimaru with a combination of fire and wind jutsu while Orochimaru was on the ground after Toriko-san had made a final kick to his face. Based on the postmortem, the cause of death was a broken neck, while the fire jutsu was cast after his death, which supports Toriko-san's statement. Nobody moved, nobody said a word or even coughed. Finally Minato broke the stupor as he slowly sat up to make the decision. Naruto flinched when his father called for him to stand in the middle. His slow footsteps were followed by an Anbu. "We've heard enough. I hereby close the council meeting. I, Namikaze Minato, as the Yondaime Hokage of Konohagaku no Sato, find Orochimaru of the Sannin guilty against the charge of treason and murdering, torturing and experimenting on 169 men, women and children. State your disagreement if there is any." Minato glanced around the still silent room. Nobody made any intention to retort. "Furthermore, I hereby clear Namikaze Toraku of the charge of treason and murder." Again, nothing could be heard. The clan leaders stayed in silence. Only some of them glanced toward the silent and obviously exhausted teen with a calculating eye. All of them knew that Minato's relative was strong, even if he currently held only the rank of Chunin. But to be on equal level of one of the Sannin both unnerved and satisfied them. "I hereby declare all information about this case to be an S-class secret. No one is allowed to reveal any information without the Hokage's express permission." Minato slowly ran his eyes over each and every member in the chamber, one by one, before he narrowed his azure orbs. Something changed in the atmosphere as if something had clicked inside him, making every attendant hunch over in fear, like a small child. In the next moment his stern voice echoed inside the chamber. "I don't know who was so foolish in your lines to charge my brother without any real clue and clear knowledge of the whole situation, but I can promise one thing. If I ever find evidence against who was the one who informed and gathered the council behind my back, he will be the one standing on that podium instead of my brother, and he will be charged with treason by me." Minato shot one more glare toward each of the still and deadly silent members. His cerulean pools left Danzo's stoic face just a fraction later than the others. After the declaration, the room slowly emptied. Some of the members stopped for a quick nod toward the young Chunin, while Inoichi made a small bow. Naruto was still carefully avoiding Jiraiya's dark eyes as he and the Sandaime passed beside him, but he still stared at the closed door silently after the two left the room. Soon, only the two Namikaze stayed in the empty room with the overwhelming silence. However, they also departed without even a single word. A harsh, snapping sound echoed inside the dim chamber as a shadowed figure channeled some of his growing frustration onto his desk, clutching the edge too hard for the wood to endure the strain. Shimura Danzo strained all of his nerves not to break his emotionless mask. Who could have guessed that the Namikaze brat would stop his Anbu from reaching the last surviving brat? And who would have thought that that brat had enough power to even spit out details like that? His undercover Anbu had informed him that Orochimaru's hideout was discovered as soon as the Hokage disappeared. He thought that with eliminating all witnesses, the charge would be enough against that damn brat. He had acted too fast, too recklessly when the opportunity that he could get rid of the Namikaze brat arose. In the next blink, he forced his muscles to relax. His old and raspy voice filled the chamber as he hissed into the darkness, low enough that only he could hear it. "That Toraku child. He is too powerful. Nobody sees what I can see, that he is a threat to Konoha." His eyes stared into the darkness, suddenly clear and focused. His face was stoic once again. "Rat!" An Anbu appeared beside him instantly in a crouch, head bowed carefully. "Let's move to another tactic. If we can't get rid of him by force, we will make him leave Konoha willingly." The Anbu quickly looked up to face his leader, waiting for the orders. His face was carefully schooled and showed no emotion. "The boy has got a good reputation among the villagers. They like him. Let's destroy that image. Start spreading the word about what happened to Orochimaru in the village. Dress as a civilian, go to the market, to the bars. Let's open the citizens' eyes to what kind of monster Namikaze Toraku is. That he cold-heartedly killed one of Konoha's heroes. Let's raise fear in the sidelines and let the villagers do the rest." The morning was awkward. Minato acted like nothing had happened before, while Kushina was weary and uncharacteristically silent. Her hand traveled toward her belly from time to time, stealing small glances toward the blonde leader. But her acts went unnoticed by the two blondes. A new presence kicked Naruto out from his own small world, a presence which sent all of his previous strength out of his body along with the blood in his face. Jiraiya stepped into the room, still carefully avoiding Naruto's eyes, but still noting his reaction, his pale face and tensed muscles. In the next instant the time traveler and his godfather were alone in the dining room as his parents retreated to give them space. Naruto stubbornly stared at his empty plate in front of him, while Jiraiya occupied the counter, leaning against it, his arms folded in front of his chest. Both of them were waiting for the other to finally start the unavoidable conversation, and finally it was Naruto who blurted out first. "I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing." Finally Naruto raised his head, to meet with Jiraiya's eyes. The Toad Summoner looked obviously weary, dark circles sat under his orbs, while his wrinkles somehow seemed deeper from the lack of sleep and the last night's stress. You should be. The blonde shinobi worded the first thing that came to his mind. The Sannin eyed him for some time until a humorless smile tilted the corners of his mouth. My best friend died a long time ago. He died the moment he went against everything I hold dear. You've killed a soulless shell. A shadow. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but somehow nothing came out of it, so he instead shut it when the aging toad summoner let out a long sigh. You know, I was aware that something was wrong with him lately. His obsession with immortality and to learn every jutsu in the world became worse and worse with every passing day. And what is more disturbing is that myself and my sensei turned our heads from some of the things which pointed toward what he was doing in the background. We were blinded by our bonds. I did realize that Orochimaru became antisocial, that he disappeared between missions, and after Minato became the Yondaime Hokage instead of him, that it became worse. Jiraiya unfolded his arms and slowly moved to sit down at the table across from his temporary student. It is also my fault what had happened to you and the others. I should have seen the signs. Azure blue eyes glanced up suddenly, as guilt started to emanate from the Sannin's pores. No. It was never your fault. He was mad. If I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes, my opinion would be different. If I didn't see the cells, the people and the children down there, I think I would have been angry at you. I would even try to defend him. I would have tried to reason with him, tried to save him. But after I saw what he had done, I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing. I'm still sorry. I didn't want to kill him. I just Don't be a fool. Another conversation popped up in his mind, in another time and another version of his godfather. A small smile appeared on his face while he murmured his answer softly. I'm not a fool. I'm a moron. Jiraiya raised a confused eyebrow, but let it be. But he silently agreed. He was indeed a total moron. Rin and Kakashi are waiting for you at the usual place. We'll meet there. And I remind you, Minato ordered total information lockdown. What happened down there is now an S-ranked secret. The last thing this village needs in the middle of a Chunin exam is the bashing of the other countries. Naruto nodded and silently left the room. He passed by his father in the living room, who watched as he silently dragged himself out from the house. Only when his chakra signature started to fade away to the distance did Minato look up to meet Jiraiya's eyes. You are cruel. After what had happened, you really sent him to the training ground? Jiraiya sank down in the couch before he answered. You also know that exhaustion is the best medicine for troubled thoughts. Jiraiya opened his mouth to tell more, when a new presence appeared in the doorstep. The Sannin let out a long sigh as his once teacher slowly approached the living room, flaring his chakra for a second to be recognizable before he stepped through the doorway. Experienced and old eyes traveled over the two sitting men, his hands unconsciously looking for the pipe from his pouch, but it was nowhere to be found. Sarutobi let out a weary sigh and also sank down into one of the empty chairs to ease away his own weariness. The three men stayed in silence. Only one or two meaningful and knowing glances were shared between them until the Sandaime broke it. How is Torikoku-kun? Physically, he was almost perfectly healed when the council meeting ended. Mentally, the blonde leader shook his head. He is too kind-hearted and naive for this profession. I saw greenhorn Chunins during the war after their first kill. Some were unaffected, while others were almost as shook up as him. Even if killing is part of being a shinobi, school and tales could never prepare you well enough for the real experience. It becomes easier and easier with time, but you'll never get used to it. You'll always remember each life you've ended. Their faces will be burned deep inside your mind forever. Minato murmured more to himself than to the others in the room, his eyes locked on his hands. And how is Kushina? Asked Sarutobi, diverting the subject. Minato made a quick and altogether thankful glance toward the third. Like nothing had ever happened. She is a little bit weary, but beside that she is okay. The seal is also as powerful as ever. I still don't know what happened to it. A fatherly smile spread across Sarutobi's face despite what had happened the last night. A small bright ray of sunshine warmed him up from head to toe as he eyed the clueless village leader. Did Kushina speak to you? The Sandaime noted the blank look on Minato's face and shook his head. I take that as a no. The once Hokage then looked at his student, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the deepened wrinkles in the corner of his eyes and mouth. One night. Only one night was enough to do the work of a decade on Jiraiya's face. And he didn't have to look in the mirror, he knew he would also find the same on his own face. And how are you, my friend? Jiraiya closed his eyes and folded his arms in a defensive manner before he answered. I could have asked the same question from you, old man. He was also your student. Not just my bastard teammate. The Sandaime let out a long and weary sigh. If I hadn't been that blind, maybe we could have found out his doings earlier. And if I even think about the fact that I almost made him Hokage instead of Minato, but I'm still hoping that deep down in his heart there was still some kindness and light beside the darkness and the madness. The old leader shook his head once more, wrinkles deepening with emotion and the new frown on his features. If it wasn't for Toriko-kun, who knows how long it would have been until we found out, maybe many, long years. I don't know, if it would have been me who found that situation, would I be able to do the right thing? The Sannin let out a long sigh and opened his sore mouth. I talked with the boy after the council meeting. With the one who had survived Orochimaru's experiments. He stumbled slightly over the name. He was kidnapped from an orphan house in Ame. My late teammate gathered his subjects from them or temporary accommodations in Ame. Sometimes picking up lonely, wandering shinobi. Minato grimaced. It makes sense. Ame is isolated. No word would reach the elemental countries about the disappearance of orphans and people from there. If he had picked up the people from Konoha or the other big nations, we would investigate with full force. Jiraiya nodded and continued, while Sarutobi's troubled frown only deepened. We found dozens of Sharingan eyes. He was obsessed by its power that allowed the user to copy any jutsu. We found ancient scrolls about the Mangekyo Sharingan. We found several corpses with injuries which indicated a failed eye transplant, probably with a Sharingan, and notes about a new experiment, which needs a powerful host. It seems that all of his previous transplants failed because the host's bodies weren't ready for the dojutsu. Their chakra system was full-grown. He needed a young shinobi with still developing chakra coils and high reserves for his experiment. It seems that's why Kakashi's surgery was successful. Because he is young and his chakra system could adapt to the Sharingan, and also have the necessary reserves to activate them. Or someone like Toriku. With his healing abilities and chakra level, he was a perfect subject. Jiraiya glanced toward Minato. I think I know how he appeared from thin air inside the village walls. Minato narrowed his eyes and gestured to his teacher to continue. I think that my teammate brought him here to experiment on him with one of those eyes. Yamato also told me that he liked to wear a henge with a Sharingan. He became obviously insane. That's why Toriku first thought he was in a genjutsu. That's why he thought he had been fighting with an Uchiha. He somehow managed to escape, and… Jiraiya suddenly became silent, but instead of him, Minato had continued with a guilty expression. I let Orochimaru into his room to examine him while Toriku was unconscious after our first meeting in the hospital passage. When he blacked out, I left Orochimaru alone with him while I was rearranging the new Anbu guards. It was him who messed up his memories to save himself. And the more and more frequent encounters with him triggered some of his memories. His rage and hatred. Every time he looked at Orochimaru, I waited for Toriku to snap and tear him into small pieces. Furthermore, Orochimaru was in carefully restrained ecstasy to examine Kakashi when he heard about his Sharingan the day we arrived. And on that week, Orochimaru was wounded while fighting with someone. Minato frowned before he continued. But then Toriku never knew Nagato. Our previous theory was wrong. And how on earth was Orochimaru able to bring him here if he was able to kill him? Jiraiya shook his head and rubbed his eyes. I'm still sure he knows Nagato. There is no other way he would know about my book. That theory is still the most plausible for his background. He must be from Ame. And now, we've got a new questions, how he appeared here inside Konoha. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes before he continued. It was Orochimaru who brought him to his lab. Maybe he stumbled across him in one of his travels and tricked him into coming to Konoha with him. His resemblance to you is obvious. Maybe he tricked him with the promise of a family, that he has a relative here. I mean you. If he had fabricated that story, I'm sure Toriku would follow him willingly here. He can be very naive sometimes. It would also explain his reaction to you in that passage. Maybe even for Sarutobi. It's not unheard of if someone was restrained by a powerful genjutsu. I know several genjutsu which plays with a captive's head, showing him his rescue mission. But we won't know the full story until Toriku tells us. Minato shook his head. I don't want to push him. His past was obviously a hard one. I don't want to break him. If he wants to tell us more about himself, he will. Maybe it is better for all of us. I mean if his memories won't recover perfectly. His two companions didn't answer, they just stood there silently, all of them buried in his own thoughts, trying to process the happenings of the previous night. Finally Sarutobi broke it by shaking his head and letting out a long, weary sigh. You're making up your own conclusions and wild theories, and desperately trying to bring truth into them. There is no real evidence to support what you just came up with. But we should get some rest. Yesterday was a busy night. For all of us. Let's just leave your wild theories for today and not bother ourselves with these kind of thoughts. We still have a lot of things to do. Anko should have already arrived at the Hokage Tower, waiting for me and Minato. Both men turned toward the retired village leader, but they didn't retort. Instead, they obeyed his words as small children would do. Minato closed his eyes in the middle of his office in the Hokage Tower. The shocked Anko was long gone, as well as Jiraiya and Sarutobi, but Minato's racing mind and face never had an opportunity to relax. The head of Konoha's medic requested an immediate audience as soon as he was left alone. And from the first minute of the report, a deep frown had been carved upon his fine features. The Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose and opened his mouth. Are you sure in this? The medic nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. The cause of death was poisoning for everybody who we had rescued alive from the laboratory. All the survivors were poisoned beside the small kid with a slowly acting toxin. We could have easily brushed the effects to the side, but when the child didn't show any symptoms like the others, we started to get suspicious. So we performed several tests and one was positive. When? Minato asked in a low voice and finally opened his eyes to pierce directly through the medic, who unconsciously flinched a step back when the always sunny eyes suddenly become cold as glaciers. They looked dangerous now, like a real predator. And most likely during the rescue mission. He was in the last cell. He was lucky because of that. Someone successfully poisoned everybody in Orochimaru's laboratory, but he or she didn't have enough time to reach him before help arrived. Minato narrowed his eyes, his muscles tensed. With one flick of his hand he dismissed the medic, who gratefully retreated from the furious form of his leader maybe a little bit faster than was necessary. He really felt sorry for the traitor if his leader ever found them. The Yondaime buried himself inside his thoughts, pacing back and forth inside the now empty office. 3 pair of eyes followed him from the shadows. The Anbu guards were on high alert, seeing their leaders raising frustration. Minato suddenly stopped. His commanding voice filled the tower once again. Tiger Owl! The named 2 Anbu almost flinched despite their experience, but they obediently stepped in front of the Hokage, waiting for commands. Get 2 Anbu squads and grab the 3 Anbu who were with me during the rescue mission. Bring them to the interrogation department and question them about the incident. The 2 soldiers disappeared in the next blink. Minato let out a weary sigh and slowly moved toward the window and folded his arms behind his back to look over the still clueless village. However, his silence was disturbed just half an hour later as one of the previous Anbu reappeared inside his office. Hokage-sama. Report. Wolf and Sparrow were successfully captured. They didn't even fight back. But Boar! Minato narrowed his eyes and finally turned around to face with the nervous soldier, who finally continued. Boar is dead. He committed suicide during the ambush. There had been a cyanide capsule hidden inside one of his teeth. Minato dismissed the Anbu and ran a hand through his blonde locks in the attempt to channel down some of his growing frustration. A lonely Anbu watched as his leader's anger had been slowly rising and rising until it exploded into an almost animalistic snarl. However, he wasn't aware of Minato's first intent to punch the wall with a Rasengan. The Hokage shook himself in the next second and straightened. His chakra flared for a second with fury before it faded away. Crow! The until now lurking Anbu appeared in the middle of the room, warily eyeing his leader after the small outburst. I have a new personal mission for you. The Anbu curiously tilted his head to the side, waiting for his Hokage to continue. Your father, he was Shimura Danzo's teammate, wasn't he? The Anbu stilled for a second and Minato could have sworn that he saw the obsidian eyes narrowing behind the white porcelain before he answered. Yes, Hokage-sama. Minato made a brief nod and he stepped closer to the soldier. Not in a threatening manner, but... The seasoned shinobi soon felt like an animal in a corner. Without his experience, he was sure he would gulp. Tell me, Crow. Where does your loyalty lie? The Anbu tilted his head in a puzzled manner, and the Yondaime was sure that a confused expression spread across his face behind the smooth surface of his mask. Are you a loyal shinobi of Konoha? Yes, Hokage-sama. Are you loyal to the Hokage? Yes, Hokage-sama. Are you loyal to anyone else beside the Hokage in Konoha? Minato didn't get an answer, however. Only a choke sound escaped behind the Anbu's lips. A half-smile appeared on the blonde's face. I know a lot about you. I also have my contacts. You are having doubts about him and his methods, aren't you? You could have been his perfect soldier, but you couldn't kill your emotions, could you? The Anbu tensed for a second, before his shoulders slumped in defeat. He slowly raised his arm to get rid of the cold porcelain mask, and the hood also slipped down to his shoulders, revealing his short and untidy dark locks. Obsidian dark eyes peered into Minato's electric blue ones, filled with regret, shame and sorrow. Only that one look convinced Minato that he was doing the right thing. No shinobi should have that kind of look. Not someone his age. He made one step closer to the boy in his early teens and softly placed one hand on his shoulder. I had only once spoken with Uchiha Kagami, but I know that he was greatly dedicated to protecting this village. He had accomplished much for the sake of Konoha, and I am adamant that his will has been passed on to his son. Minato watched the young boy's painful wince and reassuringly squeezed his shoulder a little. So I ask you just one question. How far will you go for the sake of the village? The Anbu didn't answer for a long minute, trying to figure out his leader's intentions. But when he did so, his confident voice filled the room. I will gladly sacrifice myself in the name of peace, Hokage-sama. A soft, almost fatherly smile appeared on Minato's face. However, I appreciate your self-sacrifice. That won't be necessary. You're going to infiltrate the infiltrators. Minato's soft smile started to widen, but in the next blink his eyes hardened as steel and the Anbu furrowed his brow in confusion. Are you ready to become a double agent en route to Uchiha Shirosue? But this time for Konoha? You are a liar. You promised me a free treat of ramen. The young Iwa Genin whined behind a pout to Naruto and folded his arms in a sulking manner, who just stared back at him with a strangely restrained and emotionless face until he let out a long sigh and answered. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. He had stumbled across the young boy on the almost empty streets of the village, or most likely Shiko had been looking for him the whole day to Naruto's displeasure. The kid reminded him more and more of Konohamaru. He only needed a long blue scarf, and if he would wear his hatayate on his forehead to hold back his hair, instead of around his neck, they would pass as siblings. The loud Chunin had the same eyes, and he looked back at him just now in the same mocking way as Konohamaru did when he was irritated with him. A sour and painful smile crawled onto his face, watching the young Iwa Genin, but it was hard seeing the shadow or the ghost of his once rival. Konohamaru had stayed in Konoha with his Genin team to watch over the almost empty village and the civilians. Their bodies had never been recovered, most likely disappeared together with the walls around Konoha. Something must have shown on his face, as the child's rambling suddenly stopped, and chocolate brown eyes started to observe him somewhat warily. The sour smile was replaced with a false grin when Naruto ruffled the brown locks of his newest friend. Come on, I'll treat you to free ramen after I'm finished with Jiraiya. His only answer was an enthusiastic nod. The Sannin had been late, and to Naruto's annoyance none of his friends were in a talkative mood, leaving him to sink into his own thoughts, and in a second he found himself in his mindscape face to face with Kurama watching him with calculating red eyes. This isn't the best time, you know. We have to talk. Jiraiya could be here any moment. Naruto grumbled, but the fox's expression stayed stoic, his eyes observing. This can't wait. Naruto snorted and folded his arms across his chest. If you want to talk about what you've done, it's not necessary. I understand its need. And I also won't confess to Minato until we have found Madara. We've discussed this subject for months and I dash. It's about the seal. Kurama interrupted him, silencing Naruto's rambling immediately, forcing him to glance up with a frown. About my seal? Yes. I've been thinking about what had happened in the cave. Even under that many chakra suppression seals, the emotion of my other self still influenced us when we used our full power. I think closing our original seal would prevent that next time. Naruto snorted once more and an angry grimace spread across his face. I won't reclose the seal. I won't lock you up, even if it is for our own good. No. Kurama's face mirrored no emotion, he kept it as stoic as it always was as he answered while he observed his companion. We will need our full power against Madara and we will need a clear head. Both of us. We can't make any mistakes. You do realize that? I do, Naruto hissed. But I won't change my mind. I won't let you be stuck behind bars once more. There has to be another way. I'll go and dig up the library to find a mind barrier or something which is powerful enough to restrain your counterpart's emotions. Kurama let out a sigh but nodded. While I appreciate what you just said, I still think the easiest way is reclosing the seal. Naruto frowned as his brain worked. Defiant eyes stared in front of himself, while his hands clenched into fists at his side. The blonde suddenly opened his brilliant blue eyes, but in the next moment he felt a familiar thug from the outside world. He made one last glance toward his companion while a giant grin appeared on his face. I know what we are going to do about that. Kurama narrowed his crimson pools, suspiciously eyeing his host for a long second. In the end he simply shook his head and motioned toward the back of the mindscape. We will talk about this later. You should go now or he will think that you are sleeping. Naruto sent a last beaming smile. When he opened his eyes in the next blink in the real world, he found himself face to face with a crouching Jiraiya staring at him just centimeters from his face. How the hell can you sleep this deep? Maybe we should delay this training. Go home and get some rest. Naruto snorted, shook his head and straightened himself, brushing off some of the dirt from his pants. No way. I need this training. And I could say the same. You look like shit. Jiraiya snorted and stepped to the side to give some space to the young boy. True. A small spar will raise both of our moods, I think. A small smile spread across Naruto's face almost instantly, and he gratefully accepted the help of his godfather. In the end, he was right. His gathered frustration evaporated freely from his mind and his muscles with each punch he had given to the Toad Sage. A small weight of his burden disappeared with each hit he received, and at the end of the day, he slumped to the ground by exhaustion with a satisfied smile on his face. His previous troubled thoughts were nowhere to be found. So, what's your plan? Naruto rearranged his relaxed face muscles into a wide grin. The plan is that I'm going to do what I'm the best at. Kurama raised a confused eyebrow, or at least the place his eyebrow should be. However, before he could word out his confusion, Naruto opened his mouth. I'm good at affecting people, correct? Kurama made a small hesitant nod. Then I'm going to speak with your other self sealed inside Kushina and ask you, him, or whatever to cooperate to save the world from doom. Nothing could be heard for a long silent minute. Naruto just grinned at his companion, while the giant fox just stared back at him with a raised eyebrow. However, the silence was soon interrupted by Kurama's loud echoing laughter. You know, brat, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard from you. Naruto grimaced and his expression soon turned into a pout, folding his arms in front of his chest in a sulking manner, watching as Kurama slowly gathered himself from his fits of laughter. However, your stupid ideas have a tendency to actually work. Kurama chuckled, making Naruto brighten up almost instantly, forgetting his previous sulking. So, can we do it? Can we talk to you like with the other Bijou during the war? The fox made a wondering face, then nodded. It is possible. However, Kushina's seal is different. It is a real Uzumaki seal. We have to do it while she is sleeping, or there's a chance that we could trigger a defense mechanism in the seal. Like your own seal, Kushina's also allows a connection between the host and my old self. She might feel our... Kurama stopped there for a moment, looking for a fitting word. Presence. His only answer was a wide, confident grin and a determined glint in azure eyes. Uzumaki Naruto silently sat on his bed in a meditating pose. His ears twitched when the warm laughter of his mother reached his senses. Her jingling voice traveled between the thick walls of the Hokage mansion like they were made of simple paper, and a small smile appeared on Naruto's face almost instantly. He could smell her sweet smell as it filled the whole house. The infallible smell of exotic vanilla. Then he heard as the bedroom door opened and closed, the hinges squeaked faintly between the walls. Then his father's smell filled his room even behind the closed doors. The smell of freshly cut grass and wet soil with a hint of cucumber. He let out a long breath, letting his heartbeat to slow down, while forcing his senses to settle down. He reached out for an unnoticeable amount of senjutsu, and suddenly his previously settled senses spread out in a well-known manner. He could feel their heartbeat rather than hear them, pulsing deep inside him. As they settled down and floated closer and closer to the edge of sleep, their two separately beating hearts slowly became one beat, so did Naruto's own heart fall into the rhythm. However, his unmoving form faltered when he found another presence inside his parents' room. A weak, tiny, almost unnoticeable presence, betrayed by nothing else than the faint, but still fast heartbeat. A frown crawled up on Naruto's face, and as minutes passed, it became deeper and deeper. However, it slowly disappeared. Kurama, that is. A warm smile appeared on the fox's furry face. Yes. That is you. Naruto didn't react, just his face mirrored the same sunny expression. He reached out for nature once more, and his senses sharpened more. He felt his own unnoticeable chakra. He could feel his own tiny little beating heart. Then it slowly moved. Nothing more than mere millimeters, as his own presence may be influencing his sleeping. Naruto didn't notice the passing time until he felt Kurama's small tug from his consciousness. If we want to do it, we should do it now before Kushina drifts into the REM phase. Naruto hesitantly nodded, and after one last glance toward his small, developing body, he reappeared between the giant ashen trees with a big, happy smile on his face. Kurama eyed his companion for a second before he closed his eyes to reach out for his counterpart. The still grinning blonde watched him, and after a quick shrug he just mimicked him and also closed his eyes. Then, suddenly, everything became silent. The previous soft ruffling of floor around them was gone. He couldn't hear as the osiers trees' long branches brushed against each other, nor the whisper of the wind as it playfully slipped through them. Everything was gone. His eyes snapped open, only to find himself inside a yellowish void. He blinked faster and faster until he realized that the lazily whirling mist wouldn't disappear by it. A soft ruffle gained his attention, and he turned his head to note Kurama's giant form behind him and the grimace on his face as he stared up. Naruto traced his gaze, and he had to swallow a sharp breath when he spotted the fox's disturbance. A giant orb occupied his vision, and the other self of Kurama was pinned in the middle of it. Giant stalks strung out from each of his tails and limbs, and one even from his chest, while several chains restrained any other movement. He was there stretched out, but the angry and even confused crimson orbs were fixed on Kurama behind him. However, his composure didn't falter. Just his grimace turned into a smirk. It was even a little embarrassed. Well, just a little. You know, brat, it is true that I had complained a lot in the past that your seal was small and uncomfortable, but standing here and seeing my old place making my old complaints looks like a childlike tantrum. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, however the Kyuubi in front of him was faster, as he snapped. What's the meaning of this? We are here because this boy here wanted to talk to you. The Kyuubi narrowed his eyes and finally glanced down to the blond boy, who sent back a toothy grin in response and enthusiastically waved his hand. Yo, Kurama too! The Kyuubi's only answer was an animalistic growl. However, Kurama watched his counterpart with calm, calculating eyes. He slowly raised behind Naruto and came closer to the seal, inspecting every single aspect of the Uzumaki seal until he settled down in front of him again, and somehow the orb seemed to drift closer and closer to him, and they soon found himself eye level to each other. Kurama made a small motion with his head, and Naruto immediately hopped up to his fox's head. You've felt it from the very beginning, haven't you? That something is wrong, that you felt your own presence from outside but you couldn't grasp the meaning of it. Well, let me introduce this boy to you. This is Uzumaki Naruto, our third Jinchuriki, son of our second. We came back. Crimson eyes narrowed into slits, his gaze flickered from his smaller mirror image to the blond boy on his head. Then after a tense second his barking laughter filled the emptiness around them. You think I'm a fool? That I'm going to believe you? No one can make a fool of the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. You are not me. I would never allow a hairless monkey to even address me, and you are letting that freak of nature on your head? Don't make me laugh, you pitiful mirage! He is worse than you were in the beginning, Kurama. But I think it is understandable. It doesn't look very comfortable. Naruto pointed out with a grimace, however both the named fox and the Kyuubi ignored him. This boy here. It is him. The old man talked about him. And now he needs your help. The future where we came from is in great danger. The Kyuubi suddenly became silent. However, Naruto looked down on his companion head in confusion. He stared into the fuzzy head above in the hope that if he tried hard enough he could see through the thick fur and hard skull so he can see inside his friend's thoughts, and finally his previous statement would make sense to him. What are you talking about? Who is this old man? Naruto blurted out. However, he was ignored again. The two ancient old entities just watched each other silently for a long minute, before the Kyuubi's crimson pupils drifted up to him. Time travel, huh? The Kyuubi let out a chuckle which somehow made the soft flake on Naruto's neck stand up instantly in alarm. Let's assume for a moment that I believe you. How would you convince me to help you? The blonde perked up. So you believe us? No, came the dull answer. Naruto narrowed his eyes and the previous pout was back again. The battle of wills began as both of the participants refused to avert their gaze from each other or blink. Azure orbs stared into crimson unflinchingly. However, Kurama stopped the battle before it could escalate any further. We will tell you everything. But first let's get rid of those spikes for some time. Before the Kyuubi could retort, the seal was gone from his flesh. His painful restraint simply disappeared from existence, as their consciousness reappeared in the well-known empty void. However, the Kyuubi could still distantly feel as the seal restrained his body and chakra from moving freely. The nine-tailed narrowed his eyes even more as he eyed his counterpart suspiciously. Then he simply turned around to show his back to his companions. Who said that I'll listen to you? I'm not interested in your story. You will listen to it if you want to or not. Kurama made an encouraging motion with his head to the sulking Naruto. The blond boy grimaced, his nose scrunched up in his displeasure, but in the end he let it go. Kurama dash. You don't have the right to call me by my name, the Kyuubi growled. Naruto paused and closed his eyes. He then made a silent decision and stepped in front of the still annoyed nine-tailed beast. Azure eyes bored into crimson ones. Then, to Kurama's great surprise, the time traveler bowed to the demon. Kyuubi-sama. We need your help. Your life is in danger, as is the whole world. Without your help, destruction will spread across the world when the Jubi is revived. The Kyuubi's face stayed blank, however a small amount of amusement still sparkled in his eyes. The great fox demon watched the bowing teen in front of him for one long and silent minute before he made his decision. So be it. I'll listen. But I'm not promising anything. Toriku, could you pass me the milk? Minato rasped out in a weak voice, and when he received the desired ingredient he eagerly poured it into his coffee. Naruto glanced toward his father from his seat next to the dining table. His eyes lingered on the messy blonde locks, screaming for the help of a brush. Minato's always shining eyes were still dimmed by his dreams. And his pajama were still on him, ruining the perfect picture of the fearsome Hokage, the only man who managed to get a flea on sight warning in the bingo books. Obviously that man wasn't a morning person. Just like Naruto's mother. Every morning was the same. She and his father dragged themselves down, and until they got their boost they were simply useless. A small smile tugged at the edge of his lips, when Minato placed another cup of the steaming coffee on the table. A loud yawn interrupted his silent and peaceful morning. Naruto blinked toward his mother, who just stepped inside the room, continuously rubbing her eyes to finally get rid of the aftereffects of the night. Man, I had the weirdest dream ever. Kushina muttered while dragged herself to the nearest chair and simply dropped down, snatching her coffee like her life was depending on it. Naruto quirked an eyebrow, patiently waiting for his mother to continue. Another tiff later she did so. It was about you, Toriku, and the Kyuubi. Naruto froze. But thankfully none of them saw his shocked expression, as both of them were busy with their morning routine. Minato just hemmed in front of the stove and dropped one more egg into the pan while Kushina eagerly rubbed her eyes and let out a yawn before she continued. It was funny, because there were two demons. You were talking with the bigger one, while you were sitting on the head of a smaller one. I don't remember quite clearly. The blonde time traveler could feel as a small droplet of sweat started its way down his spine, and Kurama also stilled inside the pit of his seal. Kushina made a wandering face before she continued. Then the Sandaime appeared in green spandex and declared that from now on ramen is the mandatory meal on every Sunday. Kushina shook her head and a wide smile spread across her fine features. This wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? Naruto's previous tension was gone in the next blink. He sent back a beaming smile, and his loud laughter filled the small dining room in the next second. Katsuchi glanced to the side, where the Yondaime's brother currently occupied the counter beside him at the ramen stand. A troubled frown appeared on his face, as he observed the blond boy, measuring him up from head to toe, and silently watching his bickering with Shiko. Even that he is a foreigner, the gossip and whispering didn't evade his sensitive ears. A rumor that Orochimaru, the strongest of the three Sannin, is dead. And it was Toriku who killed him in cold blood. However, the named blonde wasn't aware of this gossip. But he was aware that something was wrong. That something felt different when he had been walking outside. He just didn't catch the edge of it. 10 minutes later the small group headed toward their real destination, to one of the empty training grounds where Shiko had been preparing for the final round of the Chunin exam since 3 weeks. Naruto slowly walked between the two foreign shinobi, his hands folded behind his neck in a casual way. No words were exchanged between the ninja as they wandered on the crowded streets. Azure blue eyes observed the crowd around them, hovering on a small girl with a soft smile on his face. The child sent back a beaming smile when she spotted the Chunin, but suddenly an arm wrapped around her in a protective manner, shrouding her from his sight. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion, as he noted the mother's restrained scowl. Cerulean eyes moved toward the woman's eyes, and what he found there frozen him to his very core. Glare. The woman glared at him. With the same hateful and pointed glare he received during his childhood from almost everybody. The same eyes looked back at him which haunted him during the first 12 years of his life. The blonde flinched a step backward, bumping into Shiko, almost pushing him to the ground, who also stopped and watched the blonde's widening eyes and shocked expression with a concerned face. Hey, what's wrong with you? Shiko snorted while he regained his composure, but he received no answer to his question. Naruto just shook his head, not sure in his own voice. The brownie commander stepped between him and the glaring woman, cutting off their eye contact without knowing. Toriku-kun? This kicked the stunned Chunin out of his temporary stasis. An annoyed expression spread across his face, and he pushed the shinobi out from his way and he continued his walk with increased speed, followed by the two confused Iwanin. Naruto's heartbeat increased, along with his breathing, as he spotted more and more glaring civilians. Naruto! The blonde didn't listen, instead increased his footsteps, and he soon found himself running, dashing among the people toward the training ground to flee from the glares. He leaped over a stand, lowering his height to land fluidly and instantly round a corner. But he suddenly found himself on the ground, nursing his throbbing forehead with one of his arm, as well as a child in front of him. Naruto shook his head to get rid of the dancing stars in his sight, the child in front of him also mimicking his attempt. The child's brown eyes suddenly widened when he realized who he just bumped into. Toriko-san! I was looking for you. Not now, Irika. Naruto muttered, still nursing his throbbing forehead. But it thankfully diverted his troubled thoughts. Two other shinobi joined them in the next second. Shiko stumbled across Irika, tossing the child to the ground again. Hey jerk! Watch, where are you going? Irika shouted, pointing a finger to the stunned Chunin candidate. But Shiko wasn't stunned for too long. He sucked in a long breath to shout out his own retort to the insolent shrimp, but his intent was stopped when Irika suddenly jumped on his feet and rushed toward the blonde teen, his eyes wide and his eyes suddenly filled with fear. Is it true? Tell me they are wrong! Naruto made an annoyed grunt and shook his head once more before he straightened himself, sweeping the small hands from his vest. What are you talking about, Irika? My mom told me that I'm not allowed to meet with you ever again. Because she said that you killed a hero. Naruto's eyes widened, his head snapped toward the pleading small boy, his mouth falling open. He stumbled a step backward and his suddenly dry lips parted to answer, but no coherent word came to life. Tell me that they are lying. I told her that you would never do anything like that. That they are wrong. That you wouldn't kill Orochimaru-sama. You wouldn't kill a hero, would you? Naruto opened his mouth once more to answer, but when his eyes met with Irika's desperately pleading chocolate-brown eyes, he knew that he wouldn't be able to lie to his future sensei. To the first person who had acknowledged him. He averted his gaze to look at the bricked wall, but there he had to face with the observing eyes of Katsuchi. Naruto swallowed to get rid of the dryness of his throat and slowly glanced around, to note the more and more eyes around them. Civilians, shinobi, even an Anbu stood in the background eagerly waiting for his answer. The blonde shook off the child's hands which were desperately clutching his green Chunin vest again. Irika! Tell me that they are wrong! Please! Irika! Please! The young Uzumaki crouched down to be eye level to the child and whispered his answer only to the child's ears. I'm sorry! Chocolate-brown eyes widened with disbelief, as Irika shook his head in denial. No. I'm very sorry. Naruto whispered again, even lower. In the next second, Irika was nowhere to be seen as the small child launched himself into the gathered crowd. Naruto stared at the point where his sensei had disappeared, and he averted his gaze from the point only when he felt a hand on his shoulder. His brain was still numb, he hadn't been really able to process what had happened in the last 10 minutes. He glanced up to see Jiraiya's frowning face. Come! Minato summoned you. Naruto nodded and they disappeared from the middle of the crowd with a quick shunshin. Two pairs of identical azure eyes watched each other, one standing in the middle of the Hokage's office, the other sitting behind the desk, wearing the long white coat with the sign on his back, shouting away his identity. Some disturbing things are happening in the village. Naruto made a sour grimace and folded his arms across his chest. Yeah. I heard them. Actually, I heard them today for the first time. Minato made a half-smile and glanced toward his once-teacher. We had discussed the matter with Jiraiya and with Sarutobi, together with the Hokage's personal advisory body. We made a decision together. Minato gestured to the left, where Shikaku stood, arms crossed, eyes closed as he leaned against the bookshelves. The Nara had let out a weary sigh and opened his eyes. Someone has been leaking information about your incident with Orochimaru. Gossip started amongst the civilians and in the lines of shinobi. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, but when the Nara raised his hand, he immediately shut it and let him continue. Someone is trying to break your reputation into small shards, together with Minato's. The Chunin exams and the Kage meeting is on our heels. In 6 days the first delegation will arrive and the first thing they will hear in the village is that a murderer is wandering the streets while one of Konoha's strongest shinobi is gone. The blonde teen restrained a flinch at how Shikaku had addressed him. Minato also made a sour grimace and sent a pointed glare toward his Jounin commander, but he either didn't notice it, or simply ignored it completely. The timing is awful. Konoha and Minato can't show weakness in this period or the consequences could be disastrous. The rumors have been covering only half of the truth, that you have killed Orochimaru, but they don't know what he's done. There are 3 options we have. 1. We either pretend to lock you up until the exam is over, but still deny everything. Shikaku paused and glanced toward the stoically standing teen. Or we could leave everything as it is now as option 2. You will either be shunned from the village or you will soon leave by yourself. Nobody can endure that kind of treatment for long. Not even the strongest shinobi were able to endure that kind of air around them. Even the White Fang had broken under the pressure. Naruto made a sour grimace and shook his head before he spoke. And the third option? We stop the information blackout and unveil everything about the case. All of them have dangerous consequences for you. Shikaku observed the calm Chunin in front of him for a long and silent moment, then continued. If we lock you up or tell them nothing, the viewpoint of the citizens of Konoha won't change. However, you will be safer out the village gates without an official announcement. Both are just temporary solutions. Shikaku straightened himself and stepped in front of the young Chunin and looked straight into Naruto's eyes. In case option number 3, we unveil everything, the gossip will be stopped, your reputation in the village will be repaired. However, the other countries will be aware of your existence, about your potential as a future threat toward them and your connection with Minato. You will be in every single bingo book. Bounty hunters and assassins will be on your heels every time you step out from the village. Your life will be in continuous danger. Naruto stared at the commander for a long silent minute before he finally opened his mouth. And your decision is? The decision is in your hands. It's your life, Minato stated calmly. Naruto made a quick glance to his father before he looked back at his friend's father. Which is the best for Konoha? All options will show that Konoha's security is weak, letting Orochimaru to act that long in the shadows unperturbed. However, with the third option, unveiling your power will give the reputation of a new powerful shinobi to Konoha, balancing it again, with the cost of your security and maybe your life. I choose the third option, Naruto answered without hesitation, making Minato send a sour smile toward the stunned Jounin commander, who after a minute of observation smiled at Naruto. I see now what Minato and Jiraiya see in you. The will of fire burns inside you, brighter than in most of us. I would be honored if I got a Jounin in my lines like you. Naruto raised a confused eyebrow. What do you mean by that? The Jounin commander snorted and shook his head. And you can be as clueless as they said. Hey! Naruto yelled angrily and folded his arms in a sulking manner across his chest, and a pout immediately appeared on his lips. But Minato's soft voice made him glance toward his father. The official announcement should be done at the finals. Most of the village will be there. That is the best opportunity to clear your name. But if we do it there, all of the elemental nations will know about our relationship. The moment the announcement is made, your life will be in danger. You do realize what you have chosen, don't you? The blonde Chunin glanced toward his father with a determined expression. Of course I do. I can handle 1 or 2 assassins or filthy bounty hunters. Then his determination turned into a cheeky grin. Besides, I'm a super awesome shinobi, aren't I? One day, I'll even kick your ass, Minato. Naruto paused for a second. His face became distant. Experienced fingers brushed against the fine insignia of Konoha on his forehead, and in the next second his eyes sparkled with a new determination. You should look out for that fancy hat of yours. Because one day, I'll have that seat of yours as Hokage. The named village leader chuckled and shook his head, while the Nara clan head observed the whole situation with calculating eyes in the background. Finally Minato's chuckle died down. Sure. Maybe one day you will be ready for my hat. But for now, you have to bear the situation a little bit longer. It will be over soon. I promise. The blonde teen nodded to Minato, and in 10 minutes the young Chunin was gone after one last glance toward his father. The Nara head let out a loud hum as the gears turned in his mind. I was serious. Your brother is strong, and he definitely has the will of fire in him. And I also read the latest reports about his missions. He is a leader type. You should think about his promotion to Jounin. A proud smile appeared on Minato's face. Yeah. I know. He's ready for that title. And maybe a little later, he will be ready for another title if I'm going to retire. Shikaku raised an eyebrow. You just received your own title as Hokage and you are already looking for a successor? A sour smile spread across Minato's features. Being Hokage is a dangerous job. You have to be prepared for anything. It seems sometimes you just forget that he joined this village a little more than 7 months ago, with quite suspicious conditions, and you are thinking about nominating him as your successor in the future? Have you gone nuts? The leader slowly walked to the windows, folded his arms behind his back and looked down at the village before he answered. I can state that you are the smartest man in this village, Shikaku. You have read all the files about him. Tell me, what do you think about his case? The named man stayed in silence for a long minute, gathering his thoughts. If I stick only to the facts in the report, I would say that he isn't a spy, a sleeping agent, or an assassin. By the reports, his personality and his previous acts aren't fitting to any of the profiles of the previous cases. But, the Nara narrowed his eyes. But based on the reports, he shouldn't be able to take down Orochimaru. He was either holding back the whole time, or he really got a lucky hit. Theoretically, even one genin could kill a Kage if he got a lucky shot. Do you think he got a lucky shot? No. And this could point toward that he is indeed a powerful and seasoned soldier. A Kage-level shinobi who could kill a Sannin. Maybe even you, Minato. But if the report Jiraiya made was accurate, And I'm sure it was. Then Orochimaru was his first kill. All of the symptoms he showed during these 3 weeks point toward that. But why should he hide so much power? The Nara shook his head and frowned. I just don't know. Everything about him and his case is just damn confusing. Even for me. A victorious half-smile appeared on Minato's face as he turned toward his friend and advisor. Then why did you tell me that we should promote him to Jonin? The clan head opened his mouth to respond, but he closed it after one hesitant second as he found himself unable to find any logical answer. The smile grew bigger on the village leader's features. It's illogical, isn't it? You can't explain why, but when you are with him, you can feel it, can't you? There is no logical explanations for that. It's coming from deep within your soul. The feeling that you can trust in him. That you can put your life into his hands and you will be safe. When you're with him, you want to walk by his side. That is my answer. The clan head observed his leader for a long silent minute, then sent back an equally soft smile and stepped next to him to look down on the village at their feet. Your brother's going to be a very important ninja. Yes. Someone who will surpass all the previous Kage.